So then if you could speak for me and just make sure that I'm hearing you, that'd be great.
Okay, you do recall when I was questioning after things that had happened in my past years.
Yeah.
When I see a mic, I cover them up and
That's funny.
Push them away.
Do me a favor and don't push this one away today. I'm just gonna put a pad close to you.
Okay, so know that I cover them up and push them away.
I do want to do a little. And so the last time we spoke, it's funny because I had no idea what we were jumping into, and I did the audio, and the video ended up cutting off half an hour in, unfortunately, because of the just the time limits on the camera. And so I've set up this system now that we can go as long as we want to with breaks. We're going to need breaks at some point, but
sure.
We really just got through your childhood, right? And some of your meaningful memories, experiences, and relationships from your childhood. And I'd love to go back and revisit those sometime.
Sure.
This
certainly,
way.
Certainly.
And so, but what I really wanted to get into, and it's funny, just to back up, I was talking to Brittany and Rachel earlier, and I said to them, the kind of conversations we have today is it's not, if we're not careful, they're all just superficial, because all the forums that we've grown accustomed to now in today's world are very superficial, kind of shallow conversations. Things like, the sound bites, talking heads, even people talking to us on the TV. It's very superficial. It's not in-depth studies anymore. It's not in-depth articles in newspapers anymore. And a lot of our conversations are not in-depth. But one of the really cool things that I've had the opportunity to do over the years is just by meeting someone again and again again in the pawn shop, had just kind of over the term of those little meetings, had some really great conversations. So what I wanted to do was just build on some of those here. And I think it's I think it's really, and first of all, thank you. Thank you for making time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
No, and I've appreciated getting to know you over the years.
Oh, same here.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah, and it's really nice that we were able to have...
it's only been 10 years, I think, 9 years since I met you and your family in the park.
Yeah. Yeah.
The park.
With my little kids.
Yes.
Who are now no little kids anymore.
It had to be at least 10 years.
It probably was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you started coming into my shop. I mean, my shop's been open for 14 years. And that's one thing I was going to say is let's start here. I've grown to know you as somebody who really appreciates, one of the things about you, really appreciates fine things. I've seen in particular, firearms seems to be the one thing that you really appreciate, just craft. You really appreciate the craft. But I know that there's other things you really appreciate.
Yes.
You appreciate making yourself look. Where did that come from? Like before we get into your military, but where did that come from? That appreciation of presenting yourself like to the nines, and then just appreciating really, really nice things. If that question makes sense.
I'll say it stems from reading books.
Interesting.
Yeah. Reading Dickens, T.S. Eliot.
Yeah.
When you read books like Dickens and they're in depth, and you might say, well, why would something like Dickens or Chaucer specifically, where they go into absolute detail, descriptive, the way the wind blows, or trying to think of something that's always hard when you're pressed to do something.
Yeah.
But reading books as a child, and also because we didn't watch television, there was no television for us.
Yeah.
So it was through books, and through books you could read the word, and from the word build an imagination, sort of magnified the word for you.
Interesting.
For me, anyway. So.
And when did you start being exposed? You grew up in the Bronx?
Yes.
In the Bronx. Did you, at an early age, were you exposed to like art and music and museums and things like that?
All those things, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Fortunately for me, I had, I would call them, influences.
Yeah.
An aunt who was an influence. My father, profound influence. My mother, influence. They read constantly to us as children,
right?
As children.
Yeah.
The Bible primarily. My mother read the Bible to us.
Yeah.
My father found it necessary often to he'd read on Sundays. Back then, it was called the Journal American.
Okay.
And the Journal American, there was another newspaper, the Amsterdam News, and several other newspapers. He would read aloud, and that has a profound impact. Where you can take the printed word that you're reading quietly and silently. Yeah, you might see the word advance and not see the word advance and see the word adventure. You might say, well, how can you take that out of context? Right. Well, there's some words that might lend itself to be to take you in another pathway by just reading it quietly. Reading it aloud and listening to someone else. Agreed. You listen to how they emphasize words that you might not have emphasized. So not only that, but being a child and of all places, New York City. It had a profound influence on me. I bet. I was fortunate, quite fortunate, to have teachers with compassion and teachers who, fortunately, were not moved by a predisposed belief that certain children were, quote unquote, back then. We had no words like at risk, right, or learning disabled,
and
or
this is in the 50s,
late 40s and the 50s. I hate to go there, but yes.
And so your experience in the public school system in New York was good.
It was. I'd equate that experience in a public school system to any prep college, prep school in the world, any at all. And I was confronted with kids like that on a later.
Right. What major city do you hear that kind of commendation these days? None. None. The public school systems are actually, serving our children well.
They're shameful and disgraceful.
Yeah.
But to the question of what really propelled me to read often and was not only my parents, but also the teachers with whom I had conversations with daily, even in the classroom. They'd walk over to me and say, Lawton, you seem disinterested about the goings on in the class. And I said, because we had books like People in Progress, which was the necessary reading, People in Progress, and we all know Dick and Jane. At least I'm saying we all know Dick and Jane. Sure. I don't know if you're exposed to Dick and Jane or not. But Dick and Jane, and I'd query questions. I said, well, we have I don't have an animal as a friend, but there are animals on the streets that and they don't make the sound bow wow and arf arf.
That's funny.
and they said, well, that's just a representation. Right. And I said, well, for me, it's not a valid representation. It's not one that I would that I welcome. I really don't. And a cow doesn't make the sound meow. Or a cow. That's
really funny that you say that, because I've never really thought of that as a. I'm doing a podcast with my pastor recently. And one of the things we were talking about was seeing truth, hearing truth. The see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. But seeing truth, hearing truth, and speaking truth, and how important that is. Absolutely. And it's really funny that you, as a child, would notice something in a book and say that doesn't represent the true sound. That doesn't represent. And I think that's one thing we've forgotten to do. Some people have forgotten to do is say no. That doesn't line up with what I know to be true.
Exactly.
And so that was early age for you. And I've seen it. I've seen how that's grown now.
I question, and one thing, and I do, and the presentation of questioning is important. I don't want to be intimidating in my inquiry for information, but and I'm going to segue to the present day.
Yeah, sure.
I'm really just perplexed by Charlottesville's desire to erase our past, historically, from a historical perspective.
Right.
I believe in 5 years, if the direction that the University of Virginia is going, they will no longer credit Thomas Jefferson as its founder. Because right now, they've all but dropped the term Thomas Jefferson as its founder. Now it's the university basically propels itself.
Right.
And Thomas Jefferson may or may not, and he almost to those words, may or may not have been instrumental in its finding.
Wow.
And it's and to me, the removal of monuments started it all.
Yeah.
The belief that one or two people, and I'm saying that those monuments were there when I went to Vietnam the first time.
Right, right.
Those monuments were there when I came back the second time. When I went to Iraq, the same monuments were up.
Right, right.
And someone, in their lack of wisdom, decided to remove them to appease someone. However, if you look at the crime rate in Charlottesville, both personal injury type crimes of robbery, none have gone down. So what was accomplished by that?
Right.
Other than satisfying the whims of a group of people who probably don't contribute a damn thing to society anyway. Yeah, I know that's a big statement.
Yeah,
but the people that cry the most about cry foul, don't play the game anyway. They don't want to play by the rules. They're willing to say foul, but you're not a great player anyway. So being in New York afforded me the opportunity to go to the Hayden Planetarium, so I can actually take a microscope and a telescope, not a microscope, a telescope, and see the planets and see the stars. But that was available in New York City if you took advantage of it.
Yeah, that's the key.
Yeah, and
there's still plenty of things available for people if they would take advantage of them.
Exactly. Yeah. And fortunately for me, I know today, I don't know if they do it or not, but we weren't moved by DEI, which I think has had a profound impact on what people do.
Yeah,
I've got a complete family that chooses never to attend a. I may segue from statement to statement, but
you go anywhere you want to go.
I've got family members who chooses not to acknowledge going to any, I'll call it Civil War site, battlefield site, and here in Virginia. Probably one of the most numerous, if not the most important sites. The war started in Manassas and ended in Appomattox.
Right.
So they're both drivable distances. And to talk to Virginians who've never gone to either of the two is shameful and disgraceful.
And why do you think that? I mean, why do you think it's important? And it's a little bit of a rhetorical question, but why do you think it's so important? And maybe the other question is, why have we abandoned it or stepped away from it to know our past or to really have it? Because I think what people have done, like you talked about Thomas Jefferson and the founding of UVA.
Yes.
I think what people have done is said, and you hear it now every day in mainstream media, is that's misinformation. That's you got the wrong information. Now we're going to give you the right.
Yes.
We're going to change history, and it reminds me of 1984. We're going to change what historical record is. He who controls the present controls the past, controls the present. He who controls the present controls the future. I think is of 1984.
Yes.
And so if I can change what the past says, I can change your present, and I can definitely change your future. Is that what you? I mean, why do you think it's so important? I'm not going to put words in your mouth for us to look back and see what the Civil War was, what it wasn't. To visit those memorials or monuments.
It's because that's who we are. I mean, for me, as a Christian, the foundation is the Bible. The Bible is the foundation of for me, the faith of Christianity.
Yeah.
So I can refer to that for guidance, for spiritual guidance and uplift, and it gives me guardrails. The Bible does. It said,
interesting. Yeah,
this is immoral. You can't do this, irrespective of how much money I may need. Stealing does not satisfy the end result. If I can't pay rent or if I can't eat, it still doesn't justify it in my mind's eye.
Yeah, I hear you.
So the Constitution establishes guardrails for U.S. citizens,
right,
and the United States.
Sure.
And I think that today there is a belief that the founding fathers, and I'll refer to them as the founding fathers, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Monroe, Adams, Franklin, a lot
Madison,
of other, Madison, a lot had we're just damn lucky.
Right.
I mean, really.
I think it was sovereignty, but yeah.
I actually go into. Sometimes I'll wake up and I'll sit on the side of the bed after I returned from Vietnam, especially.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I had really gotten back or not. I didn't know if I was physically there, dreaming I was back, or was I physically actually back from there. That's how what a profound traumatic experience it can be. You really do, because
I want to talk about that more.
You want to pick yourself up and get out of a grave. I'm sure the folks in North Carolina right now, the ones who've suffered so much from Helene, are saying, I cannot believe I have nothing. Right. My home is gone. I've lost my pet. I've lost my high school ring. I've lost all my childhood memorabilia is gone, and life is just washed away. So you have to find some defense for it.
Yeah.
But to your question about removal of monuments, why to me,
right? Why would we visit Civil War sites?
And going to Civil War sites is because I felt like a Confederate veteran when I came back from Vietnam. I really did.
Interesting.
I know what it's like to put everything you want, everything you have in life, which is your physical well-being and your emotional well-being, in an environment where you return home and you have no thank yous whatsoever. Not one thank you. Not thank you for your sacrifice. They still played football games. They still played World Series. There were birthdays celebrated. I wasn't there to celebrate them with them. So the profound sacrifice was beyond imagination. And there were a lot of folks who got Dear John letters, Dear Robert letters, whatever you want to call them, where loved ones said, I can't wait for you. I can't wait for a year. Especially at that young age of 19, 20, 21, 22, when the challenges of meeting new people and new life was confronted every day.
Yeah.
But back to the Civil War sites, is that I feel like a Confederate soldier returning to an environment where the crops were destroyed, that my father had worked so hard and arduously in trying to plant. The crops were destroyed. The poultry, the chickens were gone, because both the Confederate soldiers and the Union soldiers felt the need to. That was their mobile regeneration of food supplies. They just took the chickens and cattle and pigs from wherever they were. So imagine returning home and it's all destroyed. If you're lucky, the house is still standing, but the contents are gone. The silverware, the dishes, everything is gone. So when I returned from Vietnam,
so how do you relate that to your experience when you got back?
Well, the fact that no thank you.
Yeah.
The fact of no thank you, I was totally ignored for the sacrifice that I made, to the degree that the Vietnam War protesters had more of an audience than I did.
That's an interesting point, because I think we're seeing that same kind of, I think BLM was an example of that, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the protest takes, the right protest, the correct protest takes preeminence over the more valorous and honorable thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's a shame.
And it is.
Yeah. I was gonna. So let's do this, if you don't mind taking a step back. So,
certainly.
So a little bit of what kind of established curiosity, and that maybe that appreciation of fine things, and I think, and that's, I was gonna say, that kind of that makes sense when you consider when you approach it. I'd like to get a little bit more details on this. I think you shared a little bit last time. I don't know if it was on a recording or not, because we talked then for a little while after. What drew you to military intelligence in particular? And I think there was a story around that about testing, and I remember because I can understand how an appreciation of fine things, a curiosity, a constant curiosity, and how that was maybe even that was encouraged in your family.
Yes.
And even where you were in New York. We won't belabor the point, but there's definitely things that pushed you. A kid's curiosity doesn't necessarily take him to museums and things. There's people in the background that are saying, I'll go over here, do this, do this. And that was your family. But that makes sense to me. That took you to a place where military intelligence was the end result. How did that take shape, and at what age? So you were how old? Was it the Vietnam War happening when you were of military age?
At the time of the very beginnings of the Vietnam War.
So you enlisted voluntarily?
No,
or you were drafted.
I was drafted.
You were drafted.
Yeah,
okay.
That's important. I'll say this.
That's important to know.
Okay. All right. It's not like today, and it bothers me. A lot of things we can correct, and I'm going to address that. We can correct a lot of our ills faced by young folks by reinstituting the draft. We need a draft. We need to tell young people that, look, to be a U.S. citizen, you need to make some sacrifice. I know you want to be a drummer. I know you want to be a trumpet player in a band, and I know you want to be a baseball player, and I know you want to play basketball, and I know you want to be a scientist. But however, there's a sacrifice you must make. As we must pay taxes, you must also do a physical obligation. And the other day, I was listening to I segue because
go for
today's activity when forgive me, Harris.
Sure.
She makes her. I know I'm supposed to give titles, but I don't respect her, so therefore I can't give her a title.
This is your forum. You do whatever you want. Yeah, sure.
So Kamala Harris, and if I mispronounce her name, so be it.
Right, that's fine.
But I'm doing a better job than what I really want to say.
I'm okay.
But Kamala Harris was cackling with one of her interviewers. I think it was on Talk to Daddy or something like that. It was a podcast. But in any event, she said that she was an adamant believer that the abortion rights issue, it should be paramount, and I don't think so. Even though I'm male, I think that males should have some input as to whether or not a disaster such as abortion should take place, because they did contribute something.
Sure,
I know they ignore it, but they did contribute something.
Yep.
I appreciate the fact that a woman's body is hers and for her decision alone. But for someone like Kamala Harris, who wants to be president of the United States, who actually states that there is no law in the United States right now that affects a male to force them to do something with their body they may or may not want to do, especially when she was referring to an abortion.
Oh, interesting. I see where you're going now.
Okay, right. However, Lawton was drafted.
Yeah.
Okay? And so that would imply that the government had no.
And selective service is still a necessary requirement for every 18-year-old boy.
So you would want people to believe, but I doubt very seriously if 90% of the population, male population, has registered. I don't know. I truly don't know.
I think it's a disqualifier for some things that you have to.
But there's no consequence for anything anyone does, right or wrong nowadays anyway.
Yeah, granted.
So yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. So when she makes that statement, and people listen to her, and there are some people
that's interesting.
Who are stupid enough to believe what she says. And I use the term stupid, and that's a hard word for me to use.
Yeah.
But she wants people to believe everything she says, but it's profoundly incorrect for someone to say that a woman, the government wants to control her body, and then she cackled and said, well, there's no other law in the U.S. that would force a male to do something they don't want to do. But then again, she's not smart enough to know that there are things like the draft.
Right, the selective service, which makes you eligible.
Right, it's not. Yep. And simply because we're talking about history, that's why we need to stop destroying the monuments, is because she made that statement only because she, in her mind, say that the selective service did not exist and there was not a draft. So irrespective of the fact that it may not be in place today, the selective service is, and therefore that is a step. A step in a direction where a male may or may not want to serve and is forced to serve.
Yeah.
So, having said that, I'll step away now.
No, it's okay. So I mischaracterized. Well, I just didn't know. I was unaware that you were drafted. And the draft, when was the draft instituted? What year? Do you know? I mean, and where were you in there? Was it early on in the draft that you got called up?
The draft was in place conscription was in place, during the Civil War.
No, I mean, but the
And then
Vietnam,
World War
in
II,
particular, the
yes.
Vietnam draft.
The draft was always in place even during Korea. And if I'm wrong, forgive me, but
Yeah.
But how do you say it? If it didn't affect me, then needless to say, I wasn't too concerned about it because I was already called up. So therefore,
so when did they call you? How old were you when they called you?
I was 21.
You were 21.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Had you done any college?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. At that time, you could get a deferment. But you had to apply for it. There was nothing. There was no given where it was automatic, like today's voting.
Right.
I think is absurd.
Sure.
If you want to participate,
I knew you were going to weave in. I knew for a fact when I said, "Hey, we're going to talk about your military record. We're going to talk about your past." I knew. I should have known. I knew. I did know.
But
It's
voting
okay.
to me,
I expected it.
no one should be just arbitrarily. When you register for, not register, but apply for a driver's license or apply for whatever, you walk in DMV, and I think the first thing they said is we want you to vote. But whatever, even though you may not English speak, you still get that's another subject.
Yeah.
But it's hard to talk about it all and how it profoundly affects me.
Sure.
But
so you're called up at 21.
The draft,
the deferment, the college deferment. Were you able to request that?
Yes. At the time, I was going to Hunter College, to be specific.
Okay. Is that in New York? Where is that?
And Hunter College is to the New York State, universities as the University of Virginia and William and Mary, James Madison, and Virginia Tech is to Virginia.
It was a state school.
It's a state school.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Boast the primary application is your academic prowess,
and that didn't automatically take you off the draft list being in college.
No.
But you could request if you did get drafted. You could request. Okay.
Yes, I did request, and I was therefore deferred for a year or so.
Okay.
However,
got it.
However, I decided to interrupt my then college attendance, and I went to attended the American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Huh.
I had a scholarship there. Someone approached me and said,
Lawton could have been an actor?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I'll show you that. I'll show you that.
That's interesting.
Well. Yes.
Huh.
And I did
You're a Renaissance man, Lawton.
I attended the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and we had benefactors, Elizabeth Taylor and William Holden, William.
Was this in New York City?
In New York City.
Okay.
In Manhattan specifically.
Wow.
It was awesome. It was,
and this was right before you got drafted.
Yeah. Well,
before you.
That's what precipitated it.
Interesting.
Because when I withdrew from Hunter College, then I was notified by the state of New York that I was no longer, and they notified the draft board that
no
I was
longer able to be deferred or
right. Going to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts at that time was not part of the university systems that supported my attending a college that they felt satisfied my status.
Okay.
So, but now it does, which is amazing.
Interesting.
The American Academy of Dramatic Arts is now part of that system. But
so you can't. I mean, it's funny because you could look back and say, well, why were you trying to get a deferment? Well, who in their right mind at 18, 19, 20 years old wants to sign up to go to a war to shoot at people who you don't know, who are shooting back at you? I mean, and I think, when your deferment did end, I guess it was, you were then disqualified.
The deferment ended all right.
Yeah. And you realize you're heading to Vietnam now.
It wasn't that quickly. It wasn't.
Okay.
The decision wasn't that great.
Okay.
We're talking about 1963.
Okay.
63, where we were not gearing up for Vietnam until 1965.
Oh, okay.
When the French had already gotten the butts kicked out. I'm not realizing I'm not supposed to say that.
Yeah, that's all right. So when did you join the military?
The Army.
What year?
The Army, 1963. I was
63.
drafted.
Okay.
I was drafted in 63.
Okay.
And they I went through training. And
I didn't even know there was a draft in 60. I didn't realize that the draft was
hell yes.
I thought it was like in the heat of Vietnam, which was later in the 60s, right?
No. The draft was in place from Korea, from the 1950s. The draft was not eliminated. It's a new thing.
You're educating me.
So, stopping the draft is everyone served.
Huh.
Everyone was required.
It was like Israel, 2 years.
And Switzerland.
Yeah, and Switzerland.
And
right.
in Switzerland.
Wow,
you will serve.
But Israel has to fight.
And Switzerland doesn't have to fight for that reason.
Fight. Right. Exactly.
And there's some other reasons why the Swiss don't fight, especially when you have all the bank accounts for most of the people in the world.
Sure.
That's the last country you want to upset or intimidate. But
so 63, that's educational. Thank you for that.
The draft was in place during the Korean War, 1950, 51, 52, 53, and it wasn't lifted. And it's a short step from 53 to 63.
Interesting.
And yes, they were.
That's just my own ignorance, and I have to profess my own ignorance. Is I only thought the draft was instituted in those times of real. Basically when they were drawing up troops, when they were really kind of increased the numbers and these big surges, that's when they instituted the draft.
Well, unfortunately, folks have forgot about the Cold War.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a good point.
And the Berlin Wall was up.
Sure.
So
we were constantly thinking about there's wars right around the corner.
Right around the corner. So the draft did not go away.
Especially with the Soviets and Kennedy. And,
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Kennedy's assassination, 63.
Yeah.
November 63. I don't want to be wrong about that. My God, it's been that long.
My history facts. You're going to make me look like a fool because I'm not sure. I know it was 63 or 64 stands out in my head, but
yeah, and that's sad. I mean,
it's age.
The fact that he was talking. He said, "Ich bin ein Berliner." In 1962, and the next year he was gone. And the reason he said is I'm a Berliner in 1962 was because the wall was a profound separator between the East and the West.
Yeah.
And the Soviets at that point were quite aggressive.
Yeah.
Quite aggressive.
It's amazing it wasn't till it was.
And it came down in 81.
89. 89. I was going to say 89. Reagan, 89.
89.
That much longer, that much later.
Yeah. So
took that long for it to
So the wall was up.
Okay, so
and we had we were building. Kennedy was responsible for establishing the special forces.
Sure.
So he wanted a strong army.
Right. Okay, then that makes more sense.
Yes.
So bringing the Cold War into the picture makes a lot more sense, and why the draft would still be a part of the.
Yes.
So you're drafted. You report to your basic training or whatever, and
yes.
And how does that? I mean, at what point do you get to try to decide? I'd like to veer off just to being an infantryman, just to
Well, the army decides that for you.
Yeah, and military intelligence, does that come much later? Is that?
It starts at that point when you enter the military. Prior to entering the military, there are a battery of exams that
we've talked about.
Every person is subjected to. Every draftee, every person that enters the military is subjected to a battery of exams. That one is subjected to.
Yeah.
And from that battery of exams, they'll test you primarily.
Right.
There are English, mathematics, history.
Really?
Not grammar, but English comprehension. Not only English word identification, but comprehension. It
seems like college entrance exams.
It is
almost.
It really is. That's why it's so.
Did you know that over 70% of young people today are ineligible to be?
That's
serve?
That's because of their. Am I supposed to talk about why?
It's fine. It's health is the biggest thing, I think. But
it's primarily.
But it's interesting you talk about like the stringent kind of exams that were given.
Oh, yes. Yeah. To me, the battery of exams that I was subjected to, and those similar like myself.
Yeah.
We took the exams.
Yeah.
And because I'm going back now to my childhood when I was reading in school in the 3rd and 4th grade.
Right.
When they said People in Progress, and I think People in Progress and Dick and Jane and a myriad of other books, well, I had already read those. So it takes 6 months for someone to get past People in Progress, phase 1. And when you read the book, within the first couple of weeks, you said, and you watch other kids struggle to read, and it was painful for me.
Right.
So I'd sit there, and the teachers were quite concerned. They said, well, we don't want you to be bored. I said, I have no choice. And then I felt like helping the other students. I said, well, the T-H-E, the boy, B-O-Y, went to school. And I'd already finished that, and I was trying to read the newspaper.
Right.
And someone's trying to read Dick and Jane. It was painful for me.
Yeah, yeah.
So back to now,
entrance
jumped to the
exams
entrance exam in the military.
Yeah.
The military tried to find a job for the person that they had no idea who I was. They knew I was a male. They knew how old I was. And they knew that I was physically capable of being drafted because they had given me a somewhat of a physical.
Right.
Not somewhat.
That
That's
sense.
unfair. That's unfair. To see if I had had a pneumonia or diseases that would prevent me from serving.
Sure.
And sharing the same space with other people.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to, I want to use the right words because it has to be understood that there was no privacy in the military. None. We're not talking about today's Army. We're not talking about the Army of 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
60s,
When you and I just talked about how long ago it was. It wasn't like being in a boys. Now I think they remove doors off of when you go into a school.
Right.
The doors off. That to me is getting rid of my privacy. Well, we didn't have that. When we went into a shower in the military, and I'll come back to the testing in a moment. But when we went in, and that's why they did they gave us a physical.
Sure.
To see if we had already taken our smallpox shots.
Sure.
You may say smallpox. Yes, that was important.
Yeah.
And also smallpox and measles, polio. Isn't that amazing? Polio had only recently they found a remedy for what was it called? Infantile paralysis, polio.
Wow.
Yeah, Dr. Salk did that in 1954, 55. Someone will say, well, no, it wasn't exactly. Well, it was important to me at that time. It was 53 or 54. The Salk vaccine was put in place. But the military wanted strong, able-bodied souls to serve so that we could run, carry a firearm, and be able to present ourselves as a force against an enemy.
Sure.
So they virtually took everyone that was physically capable of doing that. So when someone said, well, I had flat feet, and I didn't have to serve, it's BS, flat feet. There are many people that would want to say, well, I'm looking for a reason not to serve. And there are a lot of folks who didn't want to serve, a lot who didn't. I'm not going to mention Bill Clinton's name by name, but who chose not to serve.
Right.
And you might say, well, there's some bitterness and anger. You're damn right.
Sure.
You're damn right. Who the hell are you? I don't, and I don't want to hear the fact that you're a congressman or you're a senator. No.
Yeah.
You need to serve. I was led to believe everyone was drafted. Of course, I knew differently. But it hurt. But I went anyway. But anyway, back to
I guess that reflects the selective part of selective
service.
service.
That's what it's called, selective service. I'm sure.
I always wonder, that's a strange name, but I guess that makes sense.
Is.
They're really selective.
If the government
about who has to serve.
If the government gives it a name, there's something hidden behind it.
That's right.
And at that time, how do I say this delicately?
I've never known you to be delicate, Lawton.
Well, I am. I don't like to be offensive right away. Only because, see, I go 1,000 miles an hour.
Yeah, sure.
I go 1,000 miles an hour. And by that I mean when someone steps on my toe accidentally, I will tell them, excuse me.
Yeah.
I've got my foot in your way, obviously. But, and if they don't respond with, well, I'm terribly sorry, or make some effort to say, being apologetic.
Right.
Then I was going 5 miles an hour. Now I'm going 1,000 miles
Right.
an hour.
So you're delicate to start with.
Yes, initially.
Okay. Right.
So
No reason to offend right out of the gate.
So the military decided that, and they made I think they made an honest attempt to put the right person in the right job.
Yeah.
Really, they honestly made an attempt. So we had the infantry, which was ground forces, to actually take a rifle, and its primary mission was to close with and destroy the enemy
Right.
on the ground
Right.
with a rifle, and get close enough for a grenade if necessary. Close with and destroy the enemy. That's the infantry.
Yeah.
And then you had artillery, which is they're right there in direct support of the infantry by firing artillery pieces.
Sure.
And then you have armor, which are tanks,
Yeah.
which replaced our cavalry.
Oh, sure. Of course.
That's what the tanks replace our cavalry. So we have infantry, artillery, armor, and the signal corps, which was communications.
Sure. Okay.
With the medical corps.
Medical, I was going to say, yeah.
And then we have transportation to transport
Yep.
goods and services, personnel. We have a lot of different branches. The military has a complete community where they can operate. They can operate completely without the aid of any assistance at all. They can,
Sure.
Like today's problems that we have in the bridge that collapsed in Maryland, the Maryland bridge that collapsed. If that had happened on a military base, that bridge would have been up and operating normally within 30 to 60 days, maybe 90.
Sure. But it's going to take our bureaucrats probably 4 or 5 years at least.
And money.
And billions.
Absolutely. But we have a tank. We have Corps of Engineers. Sure. We have the Army Air Corps also, not Air Corps, but we also have aerial observation.
Sure. And were they able to? I mean, so then when you took entrance exams,
yes,
were they able to kind of then?
Exactly. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I'm just curious. Like they were able to say, okay, it's aptitude exams, but it's also probably strengths and weaknesses in certain kinds of aptitude. And so they were able to, okay, this is probably someone who's geared more towards armor, right? This is someone who should be a mechanic. This is someone that's please let me take that back. Just an infantryman. This is someone who's equipped and able to be an infantryman.
Yes.
And
yes.
And so based on exams and
there are a lot of people who wanted to be in infantry.
Yeah.
They wanted to be the best soldier that we could be. And there's some people that want to be in armor, whether the uncle's or father was in armor, or someone wanted to be in the signal corps.
Yeah. And where does intelligence fit over all that? I don't mean to rush you. I'm just curious.
Okay, intelligence for me was collection of information.
Right.
You collect the information in any format you can.
Yeah.
You go to a place and you read a book. For example, if I've never been to Idaho, so as soon as I get to Idaho, if someone is to Lawton, tell me about Idaho. I said, okay. How do I go? First thing I want to do is go to the not the Better Business Bureau, but
Chamber of Commerce.
The Chamber of Commerce.
Sure.
I'll grab magazines and read the magazines. Of course, they used to have them. Now everything's online. Yeah. So, but fortunately, back then there were no computers, so they had magazines I could read. So I go to the Chamber of Commerce. In the Chamber of Commerce, I go to the library, and between the Chamber of Commerce and the library, and a local diner.
Right.
And start collecting information there.
So how does that translate to Vietnam? And when,
I know you want to move along.
No. I'm just, I'm just trying to. So those entrance, we talked about that. Yes. Those entrance exams, you scored. Did you say a perfect score?
Yeah,
or something in some of the aptitude exams? Or?
They're not things like perfect score. They'll say the score is 100. Right. And they'll allot you 3 hours to take a portion of the exams. They're timed.
So this was no affirmative action or anything. They're like, let's put this guy. Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No,
you're capable of doing the job or you're not.
Yeah.
It wasn't based on your the race, gender. They'll use those as catchwords, race, gender.
Yeah.
No. If you can do the job, that's fine. If you can't do the job, then they'll move you someplace
We have a job
else.
for you. It's just not
we
that
have
one.
a job for you.
There's-
And I forgot to mention that too. The cooks.
I would say there's
Work in
always
the
a job
kitchen.
for everyone, right?
And there are people who wanted to be
Yeah,
cooks.
yeah, I'm
They
sure.
wanted to be cooks.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
I don't denigrate that.
No.
I didn't want to do that.
No, I didn't mean to do that when I said just an infantry.
yes,
There's no just.
Absolutely.
Anybody who would serve is
Absolutely.
has high honors in my
let's,
book. So,
Let's put
yeah.
it this way. The medics
Yeah,
and the cooks were highly,
I bet.
they were highly respected.
Yeah.
If you want a good meal, you damn best understand.
Yeah,
And we had military police as well.
sure.
So, but the Army decided that once you take this battery of exams, then
Sure.
they say, okay, this person has a proficiency in certain areas.
Yeah,
Again, English, math, English comprehension. I call it skill sets
yeah.
based on putting a square in a square, and
Sure.
it sounds like, well, is it that basic? Yes, it's that basic. And then they'd ask you a question like, did you travel as a child? Did you travel? Were you able to when you were were you ever at camp away from home? Did you miss your mom and dad? Do you have brothers and sisters? Do you communicate well with your brothers and sisters? Are you well liked? Do you have friends? Are you well liked by friends? And I'd answer those questions in a way that I thought they wanted me to respond.
Interesting.
You might say, is that right? Well, fortunately for me, I had parents that told me there are certain.
Well, maybe that was part of the test too. Could you figure out what they were trying to get to?
Yeah.
And could you get there?
There were certain things that I'd been exposed to,
Yeah.
that I was aware of,
Yeah.
that it's not fair. It's not fair to ask me these questions now because I had not gone through that level of maturity. It was necessary for me to make the wise decisions. But I knew that there were certain things that the government was doing that was not in my best interest.
Interesting.
But I didn't know it at that time. I don't think you and I need to talk about it before I talk about it.
That's fine. Yeah.
But,
we can skip over it.
There were certain things that the government was experimenting back then. They were the McCarthy hearings had just taken place,
Okay.
and the word communist
Right.
was bandied about. And if you even thought to be a communist, then you certainly wasn't going in our military.
Right. If you've ever read a communist book, been to a
Yes,
communist meeting,
yes.
had a
If
communist
you-
friend,
yes.
said the word communist,
And I'm not just
had a communist
kidding.
dream.
I'm very serious. I'm serious.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
joined certain agencies,
Right.
back then, I couldn't.
You're fine.
I couldn't serve in the Peace Corps and be in the Intelligence Corps.
Really?
That's a fact.
Because you would have been
Not well
exposed to other culture and like embedded or in other cultures that would have maybe compromised your American patriotism or something. You don't have to answer that. I'm just curious. That's my speculation, but
I'm just going to make a statement.
sure.
You could not serve in the Intelligence Corps having been
Okay, yeah.
associated in any format with the Peace Corps.
Interesting. Okay.
And the draft age back then there were people that were in their late 20s that were drafted along with people in their early 20s. And they were
You could
also,
still be drafted in your late 20s.
Yes,
Okay.
up through early 30s.
Huh.
You could be drafted. So you have a 21-year-old draftee, a 22-year-old draftee. It was dependent singularly on the draft system or the selective service system,
Right,
as
sure,
you just said,
sure.
enunciated so well.
Yeah.
Yes, 35-year-olds were drafted, 29-year-olds, however, not frequently, but you could very easily stand in line with a 30-year-old and you were 21. But the Army, after the battery of exams, then they started giving you some what they call specialized psychological tests,
Interesting.
where they would call you in and ask you questions. And I'm serious when I say this.
Was that everybody? Everybody would go through those tests, or would they start to? Would it start to filter down?
Yes.
Okay.
There were people who I would say did not do if it's a 3-hour, and forgive me if I'm wrong, because
That's
I'd
okay.
like to be
Yeah,
right.
I'm just
all the-
curious
I'd
about
like
it.
to be correct, not right. but
I understand that completely.
But a battery of 3 hours exams, it was an all-day process. They were really making an effort to put the right person in the right job.
yeah.
Aside from their jobs that people wanted to do, they were unable to do them. So what do you do with a young man who
Right.
volunteers? And we're all working together. We're all in this big pile together. The guys who volunteered and the guys who were drafted, you really couldn't tell one from the other.
Okay.
You know, a person that was drafted was right next to the guy who volunteered.
Yeah, that's okay. Interesting.
Other than the guy who volunteered was given some belief
That he could choose his
that
station.
he could choose his career.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay.
He wanted to be.
Did he have any more say than the draftee next to him?
No.
Okay.
No,
yeah.
no.
Okay.
Even though he was led to believe he was, he
Interesting.
had somewhat of a
A
contract.
recruiter would kind of give him that.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah.
somewhat of a contract. And I said, "What of a contract?" Well, you know, they violated contracts every day and still doing it.
Interesting.
So you have a soldier who wants to be an armor, and we find that he doesn't have the mechanical skill set or the ability to read and write or the ability to talk through a microphone clearly and succinctly so that you can understand what the tank commander tells the driver what to do. If he says turn left and turn right, it's not good.
right.
So there are people who wanted to do certain things that were unable to do.
Yeah.
There were people who wanted to fly helicopters who joined in the military to fly. They said, "I want to be a helicopter pilot." Well, it's not do well if you once off your feet, you're not doing well with balancing things. So, but back to the point at
That
hand.
filtering kind of naturally
Yes.
took effect.
Yes.
As people maybe disqualified themselves for some certain types of
Yes. A lot of factors came into play of putting the right person in the right job.
Sure.
You want to get to intelligence. We're going to move right along.
That's
there.
fine. No, it's good.
But
I got all day.
You got to be able to read and write.
Yeah.
So
Understood.
read and write and English comprehension, and then they take these psychological parts of the exam. No, everyone wasn't subjected to it.
But intelligence guys were definitely subjected to it. I'm sure.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
And they would ask questions whether or not you ever stayed away from home. If so, did you miss your mommy and daddy, et cetera? And they said, well, these are childish questions. And if you approached it that way, you gave a childish response, and bingo, you didn't quite go to advance to the next stage.
Did you have,
testing.
Pardon me, but did you even have any kind of understanding of what the intelligence corps was at that point when you were sitting there and going through these exams and being kind of going through this first initial part of being?
I wasn't looking for the intelligence corps.
Right. And did you even know that's something that existed?
I knew it existed.
Yeah, okay.
But not in the format that I felt if you wanted to be an intelligence corps that you went in the CIA or
right. Okay.
the then Secret Service or the Treasury Department.
That was a typical path. You're saying? Okay.
Yeah, so in a civilian
kind of makes
environment.
sense. Yeah.
So I felt that the military intelligence was not a misnomer, and by no means will I even demonize the term now, intelligence. Military intelligence.
Sure.
But there was a need for it. But even a branch, each division, Army division has a G2, which is the intelligence.
Okay.
But not in the perspective of collecting information on a individualized grand scale, so that we could give information to the division of or ground troops, information to lessen their exposure to loss of life and loss of equipment.
Yeah.
So the intelligence branch that that came into being, or I was exposed to in the military, simulated what the OSS was in World War II.
Okay.
If you're familiar with what the OSS mission was in World War II. It wasn't just basic intelligence like what the weather was like on the ground on that day or that week when you expect to have operations.
More tactical stuff?
But that's tactical.
Okay.
But more of a what is the actual strength of the military, but also what's the mindset of the military, your enemy. the mindset. That's important.
Huh.
Whether or not they're actually getting the equipment that they need to fight the war.
Okay.
What's the attitude of the people back home? Are they really supporting the troops that are in that you're fighting?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we focused on number one. I need to get back to how.
No, it's
how
fine.
God did it,
Yeah,
first of
it's
all.
okay. Yeah.
So they ask questions. First, they use the term like maxed. You got the highest possible score.
Okay.
That was permissible to be attained in the English portion of it. It's like getting 800 on your
SAT.
SATs and getting
Yeah.
800. So I
Yeah.
got the 800s if that's what they wanted.
Right.
Some folks today will say, well, it wasn't that challenging. Well, if it wasn't, so be it, irrespective of whether it was challenging or not.
Right.
But I wanted to be. The Army had I'll call it, at the end of World War II, the Army had the Monuments Men.
Okay.
The
That
Monuments Men.
sure.
That's
I've seen the movie and,
yes,
and read
okay.
about them, and so that's
right.
a real
But it
thing.
was much more in depth than that.
Yeah.
But the movie did a good job of telling
Okay.
you that
Yeah.
even today,
Right.
they should be the equivalent of a Monuments Men in North Carolina, and after a major tragedy where
Right.
you lost your watch, you lost your Rolex watch because it washed away. They'll find things. I'm going to segue just a bit.
Yeah.
In 1969, here in Virginia, in Nelson County,
Right.
with Amelia, the storm. Camille.
Yeah.
Camille wiped complete communities away.
Yeah. Nelson County was obliterated.
Gone. Folks have yet to find the bodies.
Yeah.
So at the end of a major catastrophe, even Monuments Men, to my mind, are still needed today. There'll be a family that said, look, I need to put my life back together. I lost my school ring. Why is it important? Well, I lost my school ring, and my husband gave me this ring when we were initially married. He's since passed away, but that ring is my life. I want that ring back. And, that ring may be found 80 miles away, that far, 80 miles away, or maybe found whatever it is, but you would like to put some parts back together again. Well, that's what the Monuments Men had done at the conclusion of World War II.
Right.
Not at the conclusion, but towards the conclusion, where museums had been completely, looking for the right words,
Ransacked, But
they weren't just destroyed.
Yeah.
But they weren't destroyed, and that, never mind. If I segue to what happened in Iraq and Kuwait, which was despicable and disgusting.
Yeah, interesting.
Where they actually shot animals in the zoo. Think about that. That never makes the news. There are people that are non-Christians.
And that's maybe the overarching theme is, and you hear about it in war-torn Africa too.
Yeah.
Is the atrocities that happen in the cloud of war. And that's one of the things that's a shame about Vietnam in particular, is that then Vietnam was the thing that the protesters back home basically were focusing just on the atrocities. Like, there's all these atrocities happening, and that is what's happening in Vietnam. It's all about that.
Even today, the Palestinians don't have a right, in my mind's eye, to protest and support Hamas. I'm sorry. You can't legitimize rape, pillage, and plunder.
Yeah.
They initiated this horrible course of events on October 7th, a year ago, when they raped little children, torn the bits and shreds because of what? I've yet to. You can't justify that. There's no
I remember
way to justify it.
There was many times that I read in scripture about like the Assyrians, the Babylonians, when they invaded Israel in the Old Testament days, and they tore open the bellies of pregnant women, and you're like, that's heinous. And then you hear about that happening last October 7th, and you think, oh my goodness, I can't believe that's something that happens in the modern world.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the term, for example, the term Holocaust is referred to immediately. If I said Holocaust, someone immediately says the way that the Jews are treated by the Nazis in World War II.
Right.
However, that's not true. The term Holocaust originated when the Turks, made in 1914, 1915, through 1916, the Turks literally, looking for the right term, made every attempt to erase boy, the mind just slipped them.
The genocide is the only thing I can think, but
genocide.
Right.
The Turks, the Armenians. Yes.
Okay.
Completely.
Interesting.
They killed 800,000 Armenians. The Turks did in 1915. 800,000.
Just as an aside, I'm reading Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago.
Yes.
And I got to tell you, that is history that I never learned in school.
And they didn't.
What Stalin did to his own people.
Yes.
And all the surrounding communities. Every country that surrounded Russia, and during the war, after the war, for decades, just enslaving and killing his own people. Anyway, back to what happens in the cloud of war. But
in the cloud of war,
yeah,
which is unjustifiable. That's not. That's murder, and murder is murder.
Yeah.
And I've often been asked, and while I was in the military, we investigated unnecessary, what I call, a murder is a murder, rape is a rape.
Right.
And they're not justified in war.
Right, brutality.
In the shroud of war,
sure,
there's no excuse for it. It's inexcusable.
Sure.
So there were rapes, and people went to jail for it.
Yeah.
For rapes and murders in Vietnam.
Right.
Rapes and murders in Germany.
Yeah.
But I wanted to specifically be in that equivalent of
monuments men. There you go. We came full circle.
The historical perspective of going to a war-torn environment and putting the pieces back together.
Yeah.
So because there was still a lot of post-war World War II, post-World War II events going on in Europe. There were Nazis that had still acquired positions of importance in the government, and the U.S. knew it.
In which government?
In the German government.
Oh, okay.
The post-war German government.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That kind of just hit out and reared their ugly
they
head.
didn't hide out. They were actually hired by the U.S. to run the community, to run the run the government, to be part of their police force.
It sounds like every other,
And they did it knowingly.
Nation building exercise that we've done over the years.
They did it knowingly.
You do nation building with what you've got, I guess, and a lot of times the resources that you have ain't the best. And,
absolutely,
and you know it, and you just
darn it, I wish I can think of his name right now, but I'll think of it as I'm speaking. But that's what I wanted. I wanted to be part of putting pieces back together in depth. I said, I can find this lady. We have these unaccounted for aunts and uncles. I can find this uncle. I can do the proper research, the minuscule research of looking through. Well, there's another problem though. It's German. So you learn the German language so you can properly look for it.
Did you have any language training?
I had no language
prior to being.
No.
Okay.
But the Army has one of the finest language schools in the world.
And did you go through some of that when you were in?
Of it, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The Monterey language. Language schools in Monterey.
Yeah. Okay. I think my father-in-law spent time in Monterey.
Yes.
There's a naval station there.
Yes.
Naval education, whatever.
Yes.
Naval school.
But it's all services if they want to learn.
Okay.
That's where I wanted to go. That's what I wanted to do when you asked initially, not the intelligence corps. However, they decided that the Army decided, well, hey, we got to put you in a branch of service, so we're going to put you in an intelligence corps.
I remember you told me a story one time when you tested high,
Yes.
They made you test again because you
Yes.
had somebody that said, "Nah, that can't be
Yes,
right.
yes.
He cheated."
Okay. All right.
I mean, you don't have to.
You're going to force me
Well,
to
it was just an
touch on a
interesting-
subject that is it's very delicate and very personal.
Well, it's something. Okay, it's something we did off camera, offline, and if it's something that I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring it up.
no,
It's not-
no,
yeah.
no. It's difficult for
But
me.
that's why I said
but it's a
affirmative
part of my
action.
life.
You was the exact opposite. You were
Yes.
people came in and said, "Wait a second,
Yes.
hold this guy down because that can't be right."
Yeah. We when I entered the military, we were experiencing a great deal of belief that there were certain racial groups that were inferior, and we had the United States Army had published books on the fact that the Negro soldier was unfit to serve in certain capacities. That's a fact. That's a study, and there were certain political figures, senators. I'm not going to mention Senator Byrd's name, but senators that were
I'm glad you're not being specific.
instrumental in saying that you know, it won't be tolerated.
Right.
It won't be tolerated.
And you're the last person in the world that I mean, I'd say of all the people I know to yell racism, right? Or I'm being held down because of my race. But
and I won't.
that's and
I won't. Even though
yeah.
it was a fact in my life.
Yeah,
it was a
interesting.
fact
Yeah,
in my life.
sure.
And I knew it was going to be a factor in my life, and I
But
had to apply
would you
that.
say that? I mean, and this is an indicative of that. Maybe would you say that? And the problem is, you're not yelling systemic. You're saying there were certain people, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't
No,
want
it
to put
was
words.
systemic.
Okay.
It was systemic.
Okay.
The numbers that you got, for example, in personnel, if you were Caucasian or white,
Right.
you had a 1. And if you were black, Negro, colored, and they still used the term then,
Interesting.
well, you had a 2. So they knew automatically by looking at your personnel records, right after your
Interesting.
name and your service number, they had a number next to it,
Yeah,
1 or
okay.
2. So they knew.
Okay.
Another example, perfect example.
Not that it's relevant or should be, but
it shouldn't be.
right. Exactly.
It shouldn't be, but they made it a part of it.
Yeah. Okay.
For example,
and that's interesting because that's what's meant by systemic. It is built into
yes,
the system.
it is systemic.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah.
Woodrow Wilson did that. He made segregation systemic.
Interesting.
Singularly, Woodrow Wilson.
Yeah.
That's why when they talk about worthless presidents who served that were worthless,
Yeah. Interesting.
sorry, I
You're fine.
apologize
You're
for that.
fine. It's okay.
That
No
Woodrow
apology
Wilson he used to be singularly out there, standing out there by himself. But there's some people working on it right now, real hard to replace him. Though it's impossible in my lifetime to do so, but they're trying. Damn it!
Wow.
Yes, systemic racism.
Okay.
Example: 1963, 64. There was a fixed number of Negro soldiers that could be assigned to England. Just a fact.
Really?
Just a fact. Yeah, it's just if someone said, "Oh no, he's wrong," it's a fact. It's just the way it is, and I knew it.
I won't even ask. I'm curious in the back meetings, why would they? What would be the justification for that, or even the reason? I mean, there's no justification, obviously, but even the reasoning, like how would they reason that out and say, okay, well, this is the reason why we're going to limit that number?
Well, if you're from
because
Alabama,
the Europeans
Mississippi in
aren't going to be
1963 and
comfortable with this.
64,
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, and certain branches of service, they said, the guys can't master their skill set, so why bother to put them in there?
Okay.
So that's just the way it is.
So you saw that in your through the examination stages of military intelligence or something.
Well, see, that's what stymied a few of them. They said, "Well, you couldn't possibly."
You can't be that smart.
Yeah, he said they would say, "Well, you're competing with guys from Harvard and Yale and Princeton," and I said, "I don't understand your point. I mean, if you ask me calculus or trigonometry,
Sure.
or quantum mechanics, or ask me a question about chemistry or whatever, the answers should still be the same,
Right.
irrespective of where the school, unless of course they have different answers that you get if you attended Princeton or if you attended Harvard or if you went to Columbia University.
That reminds me.
You get different answers.
It reminds me of a conversation we had the other day, and I said, education, by the way, is not limited to schools. As a matter of fact, it's hard to find in some schools. Education is free. It's in libraries with free library cards, and education doesn't. So the fact that you were educated and knowledgeable and intelligent, despite the fact that you weren't at Harvard or Yale, some people think that those two are incongruent. Like, you can't be that educated,
absolutely,
and not been formally educated, right? by these schools, by this elite,
The system speaks for itself.
Yeah.
But yes, they said, well, we're going to test you again.
Right, and that's what
I said, fine, it's not a problem. He says, well, you can't cheat. How can you cheat? They give you an exam, and they lock you in a room, and they said, okay, this is what we want you to do. Answer these questions, and they did. And again, they'd call me in, and they'd ask me questions like, and I'm very serious when I say this. Do you beat your wife? How often do you beat? How often? That question starts off as, how often do you beat your wife? Because again, these questions are designed for an at-large group rather than an individualized person.
And these are psychological kind of tests.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Were you ever imprisoned? Were you ever incarcerated? Well, you say, well, incarcerated and prison, the same thing. Well, they want to put incarcerated. Were you? They didn't have the term DUI back then. It was driving while intoxicated. They had some. Are you drunk driver? Have you ever experimented with drugs? Have you ever experimented with drugs, meaning marijuana? Smoked a marijuana cigarette? And you say no, and then they pull you aside. And I said, well, more than likely he's smoked marijuana. He's just lying to us. And I said, well, okay, if that's you, I don't believe I did. I said I didn't. You now proved to me that I did. And then they don't like challenging. No one likes. He said, well, you have to prove to me that you didn't. I said, no, you've got it all wrong.
That's not the way the legal system works. I don't know if that's
not only the legal system, that I'm going to tell you morally and ethically. I said I didn't. I didn't. Prove that I did. And those types of answers from those questions prevented you from getting into certain fields.
Interesting.
Intelligence scores specifically back then. Now it doesn't make any difference. But
right.
To give you an example, on a jump, if you wrote one bad check, you uttered a bad check, you were ousted. If you wrote a bad check, it wasn't a consideration of, well, there was a mistake. If you wrote a bad check, you were ousted.
Wow.
I'm going to touch on another delicate subject. If you were gay, you were ousted. Period. They said, well, how would you know? If there was a background investigation that was conducted to see, we had to fill out a personal history statement, in-depth personal history statement, to be I'll call it inducted into the intelligence corps.
Okay.
After you passed all these preliminary psychological exams, and they give you a physical exam too, we had to be able to run. We had to be able to do all the minimum requirements that the Army expected us to do as soldiers, but we did have to excel in some areas.
Okay.
To run, to be able to navigate, meaning be able to read a map, read it well.
Sure.
You might say, well, how do you bring that skill set with you? Well, if you didn't have it, then you didn't make the Corps. That was just that simple.
Interesting.
They would teach you how to improve on that skill set, but you had to have the basic skill.
Right.
They don't want to start you teaching the alphabet by being an intelligence.
Sure, that makes
school.
sense. Yeah.
You have to have a foundation.
Yeah.
So having said that, there were certain expectations of us, some linguistic abilities, some abilities to, they would give us puzzles to work out. And again, I'd be called in and I said, wait a minute, it's not possible for you to have been exposed to this type of information. And I had to go through pronunciation like both rather than saying both. Or why are you laughing? And that say, ask me a question.
Sure.
Rather than ask me a question. And they would eliminate folks for saying things like that. They said, well, and they would do it. They would tell you to read it aloud. And I looked at all the words. I said, every word they asked me to read aloud are the words that most they expected, rather than say both, axe. And I said, ask. And he said, well, say it again. I said, ask both.
You should have told him to say asterisk.
Month.
Because most people say asterisk.
Yes. Or nuclear.
And nuclear. Nuclear.
Well, Carter had problems saying that. And
Oh, there's still politicians. Half the senators in Congress can't say nuclear.
Hey, they said nuclear in a heartbeat. Nuclear.
George Bush said nuclear. Nuclear.
Yeah, and so
that's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Anything to eliminate you from getting in.
Okay.
Anything to eliminate you from getting in. There were.
And you feel like there was people that were frustrated with the fact that you
yes, they were quite frustrated.
Passed.
Quite frustrated. And they looked for ways of eliminating it. Once you were in the
and they couldn't be subjective about it. They couldn't say, yeah, this guy scored really high, but we don't recommend him. Could they do that?
We get to that.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
We call that the bayonet sheet.
Okay.
The bayonet sheet. That's when they are traditionally there were 105, 110 students in a class for the intelligence corps. For example, you saw my advanced. There were 120 students in the class. 120 students in the class.
Okay,
and they'd probably be four students of color. Blacks. I'll refer to as black.
Sure,
I'm comfortable with that. That's it. Four.
Yeah.
4 out of 104. And of those 4, they expected to eliminate one or maybe both.
Now, what would in those days, 63, 64, what would the percentage of the military have been, blacks versus white? I mean, did it equate to what you saw in the U.S. population, or was there a higher concentration of blacks? Do you know in the military? I mean, so when you say 4 out of 120, that doesn't sound like it lines up with the percentage of blacks and young black men in the U.S. population at the time. Sounds underrepresented for sure.
Significantly underrepresented.
Were blacks overrepresented in just general in the draft? Do you know? I mean, I'm not sure. I don't know.
I can't say. Not that I'm at liberty to say. I can't say.
Yeah. Okay.
I would say primarily because looking at the ratio of, in order to be deferred, you had to have a good reason to be deferred.
Okay.
I don't know of any black that was deferred from a political point other than Martin Luther King.
Okay.
And he wasn't of great name at that point, but someone made it possible for him not to serve.
Okay.
And he didn't serve.
Yeah.
So when someone starts putting someone on a pedestal, you got to walk the mile that I walked in, and you don't get on my pedestal. Someone else may put him up there, but it won't be Lawton. He's not on my pedestal at all. And he also, while I'm in Vietnam, didn't support my being there. You can't be pregnant and tell someone that you believe in abstaining from having intercourse. You can't do both. So you can't send me to Vietnam and then tell me you're supporting me being there, but you're not supporting the war. One of two things. You either are or you aren't.
Interesting.
So he said he was against Vietnam. So I had no respect for him whatsoever. While I'm in Vietnam and you protest, well, my protest got you out of Vietnam. No, it didn't. You didn't want to go. You felt in your own mind that the war was unnecessary. We do have a government, and if we don't respect that government, right or wrong, then you should get your butt and leave. It's that simple. There are people who went to Canada, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And I really mean take a deep breath. Unfortunately, they welcomed those sons of guns back and gave them government jobs, and then government jobs today. The ones who didn't go. That's why our government's sort of screwed up right now, but that's a different story and a different time.
You're not supportive of our current administration, Lawton? I'm sorry. I just had to throw one of those at you.
Hell no. Hell no.
I know.
In no format can I no way. That's impossible.
Yeah.
We have imbeciles and idiots yelling. I've got a dog that's smarter than yelling, and she's head of the Treasury. Help me understand.
That's the one thing that's
Border Patrol.
You
know.
So here's one of the things I notice about. And sorry, we're going to get back to you getting into. Because at some point we're going to have to get you going to Vietnam and what you did in the military intelligence corps, the Army Intelligence Corps. Sorry, but one of the things that to me is very profound is that when I was younger, 20, 30 years ago, and I looked at politicians, for the most part, I thought they were fairly intelligent.
I agree.
People.
So did I.
I thought that they were well educated. They went through the right schools and were actually well educated. And I thought that most of them could speak coherently and had really, if I didn't agree with their reasoning, they at least had well reasoned arguments. They had well formulated arguments to why they think this is the solution and not this.
Yes.
Right? I see very little of that today in DC, and it concerns me for sure, because I'm not the only one that's noticing. Every other country on the face of the earth is noticing that I just don't think that there's a whole lot of intelligence.
Leave Maxine Waters out of this. I mean, I sit back, I'm baffled by this belief that you must select a woman, irrespective of her skills and qualifications, to do the job. Mm-hmm. Then the excuse is, well, she could be better qualified if, in fact, there was some legacy with women doing certain types of jobs, as they were with, let's say, I'll use the term, blacks doing certain jobs. Mm-hmm. If there was some legacy there, then they would be more qualified. Bull. You can do it or you can't. And in my lifetime, I tried to express that while I was in the intelligence corps. I'm not going to wait until my son or my grandson is going to be qualified. When you finally accept me to be able to do the job, you're going to accept me. Damn it, you're going to accept me now. Well, Lawton, you have to understand. I don't want to understand. No, I don't want to understand. I'm not going to understand.
Sure.
Just because you went to Mississippi, Ole Miss, and there weren't any blacks in Mississippi. Think about that. When I was drafted in the Army, there weren't any blacks at University of Virginia.
In the 60s.
Think about that. That's correct. I'm not talking about the graduate level.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the basic entry to a state university.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm a University of Virginia.
There'll be folks that will contest. Well, there was a guy that went in 1963. Yeah, right. He went to he was in, not physically walking up and down the streets. He wasn't going in the Alderman Library. He was in not a postdoctorate, but a graduate level exam. But he wasn't certainly not.
Huh.
Yeah. 63.
And that helps paint the picture too. Yeah, no, that helps paint the picture too.
So, think about Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Alabama. University of Alabama. I went to I can't say what I did. I'll say it anyway. I went to a University of Alabama, at the Crimson Tide, University of Alabama, and Auburn. They are.
Sure.
That's those tickets are sold 100 years from now. Well, anyway, I went with a friend of mine, and I sat in the graduation. The person with whom I went to the ball game had graduated in 1962, and they were not sitting with me at the time the cameras came around, and I'm sitting in. It says.
And what year would this have been? This have been 63 or?
Yeah, no, this was in 1970.
Oh, okay.
1970. And
you're at an Alabama-Auburn game.
Oh, yeah. I'm at an Alabama-Auburn game, and then I was sitting, they had, you sat with the year you graduated.
Okay.
And I was sitting with a group that says 1961, 62, et cetera. And actually, I'm not going to mention his name, who said, "Is that possible? Mike, is that possible?" I mean, and the camera's close up on me real quick.
This
50,000 people.
This is the broadcaster saying this.
Yes, 50,000 people in the audience. I said, "Is that right? Is that possible?" Well, think about it. Ole Miss, University of Alabama,
No.
Tulane, Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
You know,
No, and pardon the pun, but that really colors the story too.
It
When you
does.
say there was 4 students out of 120 in your
Yes.
intelligence core.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
They weren't, and they would find reason. You were talking
Sure.
about getting rid of. So they put us in different groupings. So let's say you were on. Looking for the right term. You, I'll use it as group. You're Group A.
Yeah.
Group A, and there's Group B, Group C, Group D, Group E of 100. So there's 20 each in each grouping. Well, I'm in Group E, and not only did I have to perform well through, they had different courses for us to take weather. We had to predict weather, and they gave us some means, yes, to predict weather based on the information they gave us. You had to see what the weather was like, so you could tell the military, because that's our job, to give the division commander information so they could safely
Sure.
complete their missions. So if you had, we had weather, escape and evasion, which was part of our course.
Okay.
In our particular job, escape and evasion. If you were captured, what the circumstances were, you don't want to be captured, even
Right.
in a training environment. If you were black, you do not want to be captured. You're talking about subject you to every torture known to man. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
You don't want to be captured.
And so you're saying in Vietnam the same.
I'm talking about.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
We're
In
now
training,
school
in
and
training,
environment,
in training.
Okay. You asked me earlier about
Yeah.
were there other means of eliminating
Sure,
you other
sure.
than what I call factual.
I'm getting. Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay,
Gotcha.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were a little subjective with how you.
Objective versus subjective.
A written exam is objective.
That's objective.
Right.
However,
Right. How they
would
treat
say,
you or how
do you-
hard they are on you. Yeah.
How do you do when you look at this painting? What do you see? You know, and some psychologists said this person's really not. This what are they looking at? I said, well, I see what looks like a person in the middle of a desert. They're campers. They're walking in the middle of a desert. Is that what you really see? I said, you asked me a question. I gave you an answer.
Right.
Well, don't you see what I see? I said, I don't really care what you see. That's not. And then they're challenged. They didn't like that. But that groupings would also place you based on leadership skills, which is what? Opaque.
Interesting.
You know, based on leadership
for
skills.
Sure. For sure.
Where do you sit with this grouping that you're in? So let's say you're in a grouping of Squad A with 20 people. So I rate you. They put our names down, and I rate you. And I said, well, I'm putting Toby as number one. I'm placing myself. They didn't think I was smart enough to do that. I'm placing myself first. I'm the most qualified in this squad. And I placed Toby second, and I went down the line to the 20th person. Okay. And then you had to do the same thing. You may not rate yourself first.
So they would compile those?
And they would compile them. And the person who was last, who had the most last points, went out.
Huh.
He could have theoretically have been the best in the class.
Well, no wonder you put yourself first. If you're subject to people that are being
Exactly.
less than objective, they might be putting you last.
I was. I was last in everyone's column. But I went to the school commander and I said, I guarantee you every single one of us is last in each grouping. And that's not physically possible.
Yeah, right. Not statistically possible.
Yeah, right.
For sure.
But we were. And he actually gave me that information. He didn't go to University of Alabama, Mississippi, or
Good.
Texas A&M. Which majority of the officers in the military had gone to Texas A&M, VMI, Ole Miss, Alabama, West Point. How many blacks were in West Point in 1963?
I do not know.
62.
I don't know.
Maybe 2 at the best.
So you're saying
How many went in Annapolis?
all the military,
None.
all the military generals were coming out of these schools,
Yes, absolutely. That's it.
and most of them in the South,
Yes, almost.
and
all.
even the ones that weren't in the South were still very segregated.
Right. Absolutely. And then they had this.
So needless to say, for you to overcome those kinds of odds was a little bit of that was a battle for sure.
It was
Yeah.
You know, and I
Did
was
that battle
actually,
ever end? I mean, did you ever get to like? I guess you're always the kind of person that's looking for a fight.
no,
Or maybe just tends to find a fight because you don't mind expressing what you think.
and I don't. Because facts
Even
are
when
facts.
most people say you should probably not express what you think.
Back in the early 60s, I had a commission, and they would call me in, and they had stickmen. Stickmen. There would be 5, let's say, as a colonel, I would rate 2 majors. As a colonel, I would rate 2 majors.
Mm-hmm.
Irrespective of, based on performance, based on whether I liked them a lot. You might say, well, like them or not. That's not the point. I had to put, it was net required that I placed one of those 2 majors first. They call it stickmen. One was 1, the other was 2.
Even if you thought they were both a 10. Neither of them were a 1.
That's correct.
Right.
So someone had to be 1, someone had to be 2. So 5 years from now, someone will say, Toby, you were a 2 twice. He said, well, it happens. Okay. Now, when I was called in for my briefing, they said, Lawton, it's time for you to get your efficiency report. I said, okay, fine. You know, and I said, now this guy called me captain, in this particular case, captain all the time. Then he said, Lawton, let's talk. I knew I was going to get screwed. I just didn't know how badly. He said, look, I rate this major. I rate 5 captains. Okay? You're a fine officer. You're absolutely fantastic. And he put his arm around me. I said, I'm going to get... I'm serious. I said, Lawton, this is not going to work well. This is not going to end well. I know it was going to end well.
Yeah.
When he started off with, Lawton, you have to understand, okay?
Do you need some? You need to take a break.
Tissue. Yeah,
Okay.
let's do that.
Let's take a break.
I can state it. Say,
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. I understand. He said, look, you are one of my finest officers, but I want you to understand the rating system. I've got to rate someone 1. I've got to rate someone 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's just the way the system requires me.
Right.
I must do it that way.
Yeah.
Out of 5 captains, I've got to make a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 4. You're up against a West Point graduate. I said, what? Scheuerman? He's an idiot. Well, but he's a West Point grad. He said, and my boss is a West Point grad. I best rate Scheuerman first, or I've got my ass in a sling. I said, do I really care? Are you asking? Why are you telling me this? Well, anyway, Scheuerman's going to be number 1. All right?
And he's telling you that's totally subjective.
He's telling me
there's
that.
no objectivity to that at all.
And I have no, well, how can I argue against it?
Yeah.
He said, number 2 is going to be Wilkes. All right? I went to the University of Mississippi. I'm an Ole Miss graduate. Wilkes is an Ole Miss grad. We belong to the same fraternity. I said, well, I belong to, did I? I didn't get an app for that fraternity, did I? Then I'm a smart ass.
Right, well.
But I'm serious.
Probably not the right response, but it was correct.
I said, but I don't belong to your fraternity, which means what? Well, you're not going to be number 2. It's that simple.
Yeah.
So I'm a West Point grad. Now
At what point in your career is this?
The initial stages.
Okay.
But the initial stages set a foundation. You don't get away from it.
Yeah.
When it comes to rating you 10 years later, they'll still look at the number 5 that you got when you were second lieutenant or first lieutenant. That still stays with you.
I have to ask you how far up so this college fraternity minded.
It's still, what do you mean?
I was going to say that exists obviously in the military, you're saying, or
Yes.
did. Then that's got to exist in every level of government and
Of course. Well,
and
going
leaders.
to UVA.
Sure.
If you went to University of Virginia, if your father went to UVA, you were going to go to UVA.
Yeah.
Academics came second. Let's assume all things being equal. You weren't the best student.
Yeah.
But your dad went to UVA, or your mom went to, your dad went to UVA. I'll cut through the chase. Your mom didn't go.
Right.
You know, I'm talking 1963, 64, 65. But and that's the way it was. But the arm around the shoulder. So guess what? Out of 5, I was number
I'm going to guess 5.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's all kinds of reasons why you couldn't be 1, you couldn't be 2, you couldn't be 3, and you couldn't be 4.
Right.
Sorry, you got to be 5.
And one guy actually said to me, he says, think about this. It's not going to be accepted well when I go to the club and they says, you rated Durden, who's a black guy, over one of your white officers when you lost your goddamn mind? I used to have a sign that said out of order, okay? And I carried it in my jacket. I did. I carried it in my jacket. And I'd go to the O Club and stick out of order on one of the doors. And I'd climb up on inside the seats, close the door, and it's locked. And of course, conversations would take place. And anytime you hear them checking the doors to see who's inside the doors, you know the conversation is going to take place and go south. All right? Oh yeah, I did it. I did it for my own. I was more than just MI.
Well, this is intelligence.
Yeah, the reason I was MI was because it was survival.
Yeah.
And like it or not,
yeah,
I had 3 different wars to fight at the same time.
Okay, enumerate.
Okay.
Obviously, the Viet Cong. Right?
Yes.
I'm assuming that's one of them.
Vietnam was simple.
Yeah.
They didn't differentiate between black or white.
Right.
Frequently.
It was green. You wore a green outfit.
But they treated you differently if you were captured.
Okay.
They did treat you deliberately.
Interesting.
To incite indifference in the U.S.
Huh.
Yes.
In what way? What way did they treat you different? If they how were black POWs? They were treated poorly versus white
Everyone
POWs?
was treated piss poorly.
Well, more poorly or more brutally?
But the questioning techniques, because they wanted them to step away from being an American.
Okay.
They wanted a belief that what was going on in Vietnam should take place in the U.S.
Got it. An extension of the civil rights movement almost.
Yes, exactly.
Bring it to Vietnam.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. You want to take a break?
Sure.
Yeah, let's do that. Sometimes you unpause and you're picking up in the middle of a conversation that we were having in the midst of a conversation that we were having. I mean, the conversation that was on camera and then the conversation we were just having.
Right now, yes.
Having during the pause. And so we have to get back to the conversation we were having before. But you were talking about the words.
Rating system.
Well, I was going to say you were just talking about in the conversation we were just having, people wanting to elevate the identity as an African American. And I know you prefer black, but African American above anything else in identifying you among the people around you and saying, as an not as a man, not as an American.
It won't be on my gravestone.
Isn't that funny that they say
no one will know?
You can almost guarantee when someone walks up to you and wants to ask you a question, they say as an.
Yes.
The next thing coming out of their mouth, you know it's going to be as an African American.
Yes.
It's not going to be as an American, as a military man, as a father, as
All
a man,
Keep
as
going.
a
Exactly.
Yeah, none of those things. It's going to be as a patriot, as a none of those, as a Christian.
Yes.
It's going to be as an African American.
Yes.
And it's really interesting that I don't know where this fits in our conversation, but it's just really interesting that we tend to elevate that above everything else, and why? Why is that so important, and why do we prioritize that over everything else? I mean,
I'll be honest with you. I find it offensive. The term is offensive to me.
Yeah.
It truly, truly is. All my life, my father said, and I was fortunate being in New York, and I'm going to go back to New York again because I went to Bedloe's Island. Someone says, "Where's Bedloe's Island?" I said, "You're not from New York. Don't BS me, okay?" Well, I'm from New York. No, you don't. You know what Bedloe's Island is?
I'm not from New York, so I don't know.
Okay. Bedloe's Island. The islands all around New York City.
Sure.
Islands, actual geographical islands.
Yeah.
Bedloe's, the Statue of Liberty is on Bedloe's Island.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
It's on an island. They're also, come on, the name of the prison right there. It's also on its own island.
I know. I've actually seen
it. Weinstein allegedly committed suicide.
Yeah, and why am I blanking now? Because we actually were just recently there. We were at the harbors across on the New Jersey side, looking at Statue of Liberty.
Exactly.
Rikers? Is it Rikers?
Rikers Island.
Rikers, yeah.
Right. And there's also Governor's Island.
Right. Okay.
Governor's
Yeah.
Island, where I used to be assigned. By the way, that was my first intelligence assignment. I was at Governor's Island, which is one of the islands there.
Yeah.
The military post is there. But
You're going back to New York. Yeah.
I went back to New York, but that's one of the benefits of being there is that I went to the museums daily. Museum of Natural History, Museum of American History, the Bronx Zoo, which is going to the zoological park is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's a learning place to learn. And Hayden Planetarium, the Theodore Roosevelt Museum, just going to the museums alone. If you go to Museum of Natural History, Theodore Roosevelt's exploits in Africa, some of his exploits are there. The prehistoric dinosaurs are there.
Yeah. I've seen the movie National. What was it called? The Night at the Museum. Night at the Museum was my exposure to that
You can
museum.
spend weeks there.
Yeah.
Weeks there.
Yeah.
It was a place of learning. It truly was. The entire city, a place of learning.
Well, back to the conversation where we elevate African American. We'd say African American.
Right.
Yeah, and you were heading off to the.
That's why I find it. I wasn't African American when I was youth. I wasn't American. I only became African American when it was socially acceptable by a political ploy, specifically by two. Bill Clinton and Jesse Jackson. That's it.
Is that when the term?
That's it.
That's when the term kind of came to
1981, 82, or 83. Jesse Jackson and Bill Clinton jointly decided we need to divide America in order for us to win and keep winning these political rivalries with the Republican Party. We need to separate and divide America, and we can do it. We can make America African American. That will make them denounce being U.S. citizens. Make them angry with whites in general. So we don't have a unified America, and we can win our votes. We'll get all the African American votes. That's all they wanted, and it worked. It worked.
Yeah,
just those two
shame
thugs.
on us. Yeah.
You might say that's not true. It wasn't a gradual thing like Martin Luther King.
Yeah, I remember. I remember as a kid. It was not. It was white and black.
Yes.
You say white and black, and and
the term
Hispanic,
Negro was fading away.
Yeah.
Colored was gone.
Right.
But when I was in the military, I was all three.
But when you hyphenate it and put American in it, it means okay. I'm a different. It's not that I'm a black man. And I'm an American.
In American society.
Right. Or I'm an American and I happen to be black, or I'm an American and I happen to be white. Now I'm a segment of America. I'm this African American or whatever, hyphenated American.
Yes.
And that's I can see why it's very divisive.
I choose not to be hyphenated.
Right.
I refuse to be hyphenated. I'll scratch through things that I really don't want to. If the government had given me a form to fill out,
I've seen you do
and
it.
I don't want to. Yes, and I don't want to fill it at some, but I'll scratch through it.
Sure.
I'm neither of the three. You can call me Lawton. You can call me Major Durden. You can call me Butthead. I'll answer the Butthead before I were African American. Because Butthead, you're going to get an answer with me.
It's going to get some kind of answer.
Oh, yeah. You're going to get a response from me. and it's not going to end well.
Yeah, I get a response. It's
not going to end well.
So that was our little tangent. You've dealt with the people trying to subjectively keep you aside. Let's get into Vietnam if you don't mind. I mean,
we can go there.
Yeah,
yes.
And tell me what that. I mean, I don't know. One of the things I'd like to hear is what experiences shaped you when you think about my time in Vietnam. How do you generally kind of characterize that time? The people that were really impactful. Like what kind of relationships you had there. And that was you gave me this picture there.
Vietnam is not easy.
There's a picture of you, and is this when you first got there? Is this early on, or
it's hard to say. One day it's hard to differentiate one day from another.
Yeah,
with the understanding that there's no first day in Vietnam,
right?
Midday in Vietnam. Every day is the same. Miserable.
Okay.
And I genuinely mean that.
And when you say miserable, so it was miserable because it was a very hot and humid place, yes?
No, being shot at makes it miserable.
Well,
no,
okay.
I go to the obvious first.
Sorry.
I thought it was a test question.
No, and that just shows you the ignorance of someone who's never been in combat. I mean, seriously, of course, you're in a combat zone.
And it's not
people
learning.
Are shooting at you.
It's not a learned thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't a gradual acceptance. For example, if you said, Lawton, I want to hire you to do a job, and you go through all the precursors of pre-qualification, you said, okay, I'm going to employ you. I think it's going to work out well. You're going to work out well with the team. And then you walk me through, this is how I open the building up. This is how I close the building at night.
Sure.
And walk me through, well, you don't get that in Vietnam. Okay, as the plane is landing, think about this. The plane is landing. The VC, the greatest reward for them would be able to rocket and make a plane that's landing with 210 soldiers
troops
on it, fresh troops, to have it crash. Mm-hmm. That's a hoorah.
Yeah.
Or the next greatest thing is to have one taking off. The guys that have been in Vietnam for a year,
that are headed home,
they're getting ready to home to shoot that down.
Huh.
That would be the greatest.
Yeah.
I think that would be greater than the guys coming in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they wanted more than anything. So
that was something that was on your mind. Did they tell you that? When you're heading off to Vietnam, are they telling you, listen, from the time you guys enter airspace, people are going to be shooting at you and trying to kill you? Is that something that was top of mind for you in the training or not? Okay.
Yes, it's learned experience.
And you're already in this. As you fly into Vietnam for the first time, you're already in the intelligence corps, and so your task when you land is going to be wrapped up in that identity. You're part of the intelligence corps. Is that right? Or
my identity is going to be survival.
Right.
No, yeah. And you might say,
no,
well,
I appreciate that. Thank you for the perspective. Yeah.
No, I'm not MI yet. I'm not MI until I get to that unit. Right now, I'm an infantryman. I've got a rifle. I don't have one, and that bothered me.
So when you're landing, you haven't been issued a rifle. You don't get issued a rifle until after you are in country, and
that's correct.
Okay. Huh. Okay. Why'd that bother you?
However, pardon?
I guess it bothers you because people they're definitely going to try to shoot at you, and you can't shoot back.
Prior to going to Vietnam, we went through courses. I went through escape and evasion.
Okay.
That's part of training.
Yeah.
To be able to not to be captured.
Sure.
Do not be captured. In my business, they said there is no survivability rate for you guys. Okay? If they capture you, they're going to torture you and ultimately
specifically
kill
intelligence corps, you're saying?
Specifically.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Okay. I don't know what the other guys did. I don't know what artillery and infantry. Normally,
so that was top priority. Do not be captured.
Do not be captured.
Okay.
Period.
Yeah.
Do not be captured.
Okay.
It wasn't as once captured, you do the following.
Right.
Do not be captured. And it wasn't something to be taken lightly.
Sure.
So my thought was, and the amazing thing about Vietnam, if you want to talk about Vietnam, I'll talk about the intimacies that took place about being in Vietnam.
Yeah.
When you say goodbye to your family, in my particular case, my mother.
Yeah. Was your father, was he still living?
Father, he was living.
Okay.
I was a young man. I was still
you were
a boy.
young.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
You know, and the feeling of I'm going to fight a war
right
for my country, I felt, and they wanted me to feel honored. Believe it or not, honored in representing the family and the country and do your job, do it well. Okay? Yeah. My mother wept and she said, I don't want you to go. I really don't want you to go. We had already lost 2 cousins that had been killed in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, it wasn't.
It was not good.
Yeah.
There were a lot of blacks that went, they were crippled, maimed, or killed. I had 2 that had already been killed in Vietnam that was in my graduate high school class, even though I had already gone to college.
Wow.
Lionel Bryan, he was killed.
Huh.
So it wasn't good. It wasn't a comforting level mentality of going to Vietnam.
Right.
Surviving was my first.
And that's why you wanted the gun when you landed.
Had one with me when I landed.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And that's one of the things I know about you, Lawton.
Yes. Okay. So that's a given.
Never don't have
you
a
might say,
gun.
well, that's illegal. I can't admit to it. I won't admit to it.
Sure.
But I certainly was
And you
not
haven't
armed.
admitted to it
Let's
here.
put it this way. I wasn't armed. And I wasn't going to count on the government taking care of me.
Sure.
I had to ensure myself that...
Did you hear that, everybody? So that's a good lesson for everybody. Don't ever count on the government to take care of you. First responders is that it's built into the name. Responders. They're responding to something that already happened.
Absolutely.
And they're not the first responders. The victim is.
The victim is the first responder.
Yeah, the person that's supposed to be the victim is the first responder.
Can you imagine there are communities in the United States where they actually pick the radio up and tell you publicly that the response time for 911 is an hour to 2 hours? Why don't you just tell all the thugs that?
Yeah, right.
Well, this is what you've done.
That's what they've done, yeah.
So they've got an hour and a half to rob you, an hour and a half to rape you, an hour and a half to rob your bank, your jewelry store.
Yeah.
I said, that's insane.
Yeah.
You know, and you
I didn't mean to take us down this tangent.
They don't listen to the police scanner.
Yeah.
Every good thug has a police scanner.
Yeah, sure.
Come on. I mean, you guys don't think through this well, do you?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, every good criminal wants to know where it's dark, not where it's light.
Thank you.
So if they know where the cops aren't, that's...
I don't see any bad guy with a vest with a camera on it. I truly don't.
That's right. Just the cops get to wear those.
Exactly.
And someone said the other day that politicians should have to wear body cams.
I like that.
Isn't that a great idea?
I like that.
With every lobbyist meeting, the politicians should have to wear body cams.
But they would actually have someone like you edit it out for them, though.
That's right.
It would be
Sorry, you're coming. So you're flying in.
So Vietnam was already. I was briefed by guys that had already been to Vietnam, and they were good friends that briefed me thoroughly. This is what you can expect.
Right.
The heat.
From the day you land to the day you leave.
Bring the following items with you, for your own survival.
Okay.
And know that socks, dry socks, because the monsoon, it rains and it rains and it rains 12, 13 days in succession. And you think you're going to get relief? No, you don't.
Wow.
21 days in succession. Every day it rains. Every day. There's nothing dry. Your underwear isn't dry. Your armpits aren't dry. Your feet aren't dry, everything. And you get everything that starts to rot, mildew all throughout your body. And that's a horrible feeling within itself. But I haven't landed yet.
I was going to say, but even you think about that, and you got to deal with that and being shot at. Because there's always the and being shot at. It's like everything else, I got to deal with all this, and I'm being shot at.
And being rocketed.
Yeah. Well,
there is no rest. Yeah. Rockets, being shot at. An integral part
were you in I guess there's really, and I don't know enough about Vietnam. Were you in a conflict area from the day you land? I mean, is that just Vietnam so small? It's so small that,
before you take off. So don't believe the movies.
Right, yeah.
I don't watch the movies. Somebody says, why don't you watch? Have you seen Battle Flag? I think there's a couple of movies out. One is, the first one they put out was years ago. De Niro's in it, even though I don't like his politics.
Yeah. He's pretty.
What's the very first one? I can't think of it right now, but I'll think of it as I'm speaking.
I don't know. There's Platoon. There's
Platoon,
Vietnam, and there's one called Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Yeah,
right. I said, how can you call it? How can you call it entertainment?
Right. Right.
How can you call it entertainment? It's not entertainment. If you've been in a plane crash, you don't watch movies about plane crashes and thinking it's
a good point. Yeah.
So I'll tell you the difficult thing about Vietnam that's never talked about, and they hadn't interviewed me after I got back, after I'd returned from.
Feel free to take a sip of your coffee too. I'm sorry that I said feel free to take a sip of your coffee.
I shall.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize.
But then again, like landing in Vietnam, I don't want it to burn me either.
Yeah,
I can feel the heat.
Yeah.
I know the heat when I feel it.
That's right.
I don't need anyone to tell me, oh, by the way, it's going to be hot there. Fortunately for me, I did my own research on Vietnam.
Yeah.
The political situation that developed, why the North Vietnam felt that they wanted to like North Korea and South Korea, say, okay, we want this country to be a whole country rather than we all look alike. And think about this. We've got these foreigners coming in telling us why we should be separate from each other. We speak the same language. They don't speak our language. Think about that.
Yeah.
And I said to myself, are these guys going to really welcome me? I'm supposed to work with them.
Right.
Okay.
The South Vietnamese.
Yeah, South Vietnamese.
Okay. And this was in it. I mean, at the core, this was a communist thing. It was a Russia thing, right? This was communist North Vietnam, or
The communist North Vietnam,
was it a democratic
South Vietnam?
Right. Okay. Okay.
So
North Korea, South Korea. I mean, there's a lot of okay. All right.
But they have a common language, a common culture,
Sure.
a common religion.
The divided by politics,
Christians, divided by politics
and political leaders.
Think about this. I'm number 4.
Right.
Who the hell am I to tell someone?
Right.
Did I speak their language? No. Did I involved in their culture? They're not Christians.
Right.
They're not Christians.
Right.
And I don't speak Vietnamese, and I don't look Vietnamese.
I see what you're saying. So the North Vietnamese and South Vietnamese share those top 3,
and I can't differentiate one from the other.
And they're from some kind of democracy, and so are you. Okay.
Right. Unless you shoot at me, then I figure it out.
Right. Okay.
But landing in Vietnam was difficult. As I said, those were priorities, and I knew that.
Yeah.
There was other soldiers with me who didn't feel as strongly about it as I did. I'm sure they didn't.
Yeah.
That a primary objective with the enemy is shooting down an aircraft taking off and another aircraft landing with fresh soldiers, and one taking off with guys who had been here a year and they want to go home.
Yeah.
But
is that what the term was? A year? It was 12 months.
Yes.
It was okay.
Yes.
So you knew you were there for 12 months.
Yes. And to tell you how the atmosphere was, that I left San Francisco, Oakland Army Air Terminal, and from there we went to. I want to make sure it's right, because sometimes it said, "Oh no, it went to Hawaii." We might have gone from San Francisco. We might have gone to Hawaii, but we went to Hawaii briefly. This is military transport or outsourced military transport.
Sure.
They're commercialized, chartered, commercialized.
Right.
And then from there, we went to Clark in the Philippines. We landed in the Philippines. Okay. Now, in the interim, I didn't go with a unit. I didn't go with the 1st Infantry Division or the Maricao Division or the 173rd Airborne Brigade. I went as an individual to replace someone else who was already there.
Right.
As a lot of folks on this plane did. The units, the intact units had already been assigned there. So I'm going over as a replacement.
Yeah. Okay.
Virtually everyone on this plane is. So having said that, I'm not going over with anyone I know.
Okay.
I'm going over as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy sitting next to me, when we take off from Oakland Terminal, the guy that I'm sitting next to on the plane, he and I strike a conversation. So
this is a guy you've done no training with. You've never been in.
I don't know them. I know no one on that plane.
Okay.
No one.
No one knew anyone.
There might have been people but that wasn't my discussion with anyone at that point.
Okay.
I know I didn't know anyone else.
Okay.
And the gentleman that sat on my left didn't know anyone else on there either. And we started talking. It's was
that by design? Okay, I guess it's just the way it was.
Just the way it was.
The way of replenishing troops.
They didn't think through that.
Okay.
They didn't think through it well, and I'll explain why.
Because modern military, you would take platoons and you would take divisions, or I don't even know what the troop divisions would be. You would take almost like little family units, right?
Yes. However, you still need replacements. They had replacements in Vietnam.
Exactly.
They had replacements in Korea. They had replacements in World War II.
Yeah. Okay. So you said you strike up a conversation with him, and is that you're just saying this conversation led you to realize that he didn't know anyone either, or was there?
We talked about where are you going, what are you doing, and blah blah blah. What do you do? And I said, well, we talked. Mm-hmm. Don't know his name now. We talked.
Sure.
So now it's a lengthy flight. So from Oakland to Oakland to Hawaii, I'm going to say 4 hours, 4.5 hours. I'm not certain at this juncture,
Sure.
So you should know. I wasn't worried about time.
I wouldn't think so.
The sinking feeling of I'm going to Vietnam wasn't there yet.
Yeah.
Wasn't there because I just left. But we landed in Hawaii, and there's some movement around of, do you want to change seats? I said, let me sit with this guy, I'm getting to know him. Things are going well. But we take off, and there's a lot of noise, hurrah on the planes, everybody's playing stereos, and back then you could smoke on the plane.
Oh, right.
know.
Okay. Sure.
See,
There
you
used to
see?
be ashtray in the
Yeah,
old
you
DC
forget about
10s. I've
things
still
like that.
seen old DC 10s that haven't been decommissioned
Right.
yet. Have
See?
ashtrays.
Okay, so with everyone smoking on the plane, you might say,
Sure.
"I'm smoking." Sure, what the hell? Am I worried about a vice on the way to Vietnam? You think? Okay,
I don't think so.
so we got the little drinks were sort of minimally.
Sure.
I'm trying to remember if they even served us drinks, but I'm sure they did. But you were limited. They don't want a bunch of alcoholics landing.
Right. Right.
So we take off from trying to establish this atmosphere
Sure.
for you. So we take off from Oakland, land in Hawaii. I'm still sitting next to the guy. I think they were there for an hour and a half for refuel or something. They didn't allow anybody to get off, and with good reason.
Yeah. Sure.
So from there, we go to Clark in the Philippines.
Okay.
The conversation is still lively. Mike, how are you? Now I'm meeting other people on the plane because it's
Sure.
about 8 hours from Hawaii to Clark in the Philippines. Maybe 8 hours. I don't know.
But then it gets real when you take off from the Philippines, I bet.
I'm going to get to that point.
Okay.
Everybody's listening to records, and we're smoking and
Sure.
some uproarious laughter. You hear guys telling jokes. There were probably 190 guys on the plane. It's loud.
Sure.
Everyone's talking, seatbelts are landing, whatever. And 8 hours later, we get to know each other really, really well. And it lands in the Philippines. This is it. It's an hour and a half from Clark, Philippines to Vietnam.
Oh, wow. Okay. Short flight.
Short flight. So they give us, now they changed personnel. About MPs are now getting on to make sure that everyone got off the plane. And I noticed that. I said, attitude change.
Yeah.
Okay. And they give us a brief warning. Gentlemen, you're going to be landing in Vietnam in probably in an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. We're not a commercial entity. We're going to land our flight in a non-commercial landing. It's going to drop. Okay.
Got you.
We're not going to make that general's glide come in at one. No.
Right.
We're going to drop, and you're going to feel the drop.
And this was now a military plane.
No, it's still chartered.
It's still a commercial plane.
It's a chartered commercial
but it's not
flight.
a commercial kind of flight pattern.
No, it's not a typical commercial tourist.
Sure. Okay.
General landing, be
Right.
quiet. He says it's going to be abrupt. It's
Okay.
going to be a serious drop, deceleration. You will feel it all, and just know that we'll get you on the ground safely.
Okay.
And I said, that wasn't necessary, but he said it anyway. I said, well, that's your job, and I'll take care of myself at that point.
Sure.
And Vietnam, as it comes in, we came in at Tonsinut, and if I mispronounce it, Tonsinut, whatever it is, I don't want to pronounce it correctly.
Sure.
But it was pockmarks. You look at it looked like bad case of acne, the countryside, where rockets had
I would
gone
say
off.
artillery. Yeah.
Yes, you can see it. There was one word said. There were stewardesses, I'll call them stewardesses, hostesses on the plane. They were conversing with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you could hear the buzzing and the noise. It was absolute silence.
I bet.
Absolute silence. There's a difference between silence and absolute silence. And then there was that eerie. You could hear the prayers. Wow. It was so quiet that no one talked anymore. The conversations were gone. There was nothing. You could hear the whispering. The guys who were Catholics took their rosaries out. It was the most uncomfortable feeling. It was a funeral for the living. That's how I'm thinking back on how it felt. I don't think I've gone in funerals that were more silent.
Was the expectation, or when
the plane landed
during that are you thinking, and maybe you're not thinking either one, I'm definitely going to make it home, I'm going to fight through this, I'm going to make it home,
about that.
or are you
I just
thinking I'm not
going
going
to plane on the ground safely?
Okay.
I'm not a good flyer anyway. I don't do well in the air.
I just want to get off this plane.
I just want to get F off.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all I wanted to do. I just want to get F off.
Yeah.
As the plane is landing in, it comes in hard, abrupt descent. I'm looking at it and the scurrying, and the plane lands hard, and they're announcing on the flights, everyone has to get off as quickly as you can, and everyone will get off. Because as we were getting off, another group was coming on. I mean, they don't go with the traditional lay around and play games.
They'll refuel it
for real.
in Philippines.
They refuel in the Philippines.
Right.
They want to get you off and get off on the ground.
Interesting.
It landed so hard that, and you can almost hear the plane, and it was turning around as we landed, and I could see the pox marks. And when the mic system doesn't work well, and they're yelling instructions with you of what to do, when we got off, there was an air raid. There were rockets coming in.
Oh, wow.
Okay, and you look outside, and what's the first thing I see? Aluminum caskets. Because they're putting caskets on this plane in the cargo area.
Okay.
What a sickening feeling.
Wow.
They came in the same way I am, but they're going out in a different way. And I'll try to explain in my own words now without having thought through it before.
Yeah.
About the feeling.
Yeah.
You get off, and all the training that they gave you about survival, escape and evasion, and the ability to run, the ability to carry a pack, the ability to read the language, and they give me a little language. I had a little language of how to understand what to do.
Right.
My instinct was to get off this plane and get into some place where I can get my feet on the ground with the rockets going off, the sirens going off, the rockets going off, and me with no damn gun.
Right.
Okay? They should have given us guns in the Philippines.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's politicians.
But that was policy. I mean, that's just the way they did it.
Yeah,
that was standard operating procedure.
That it doesn't make it right.
No. But it's just because it's standard doesn't make it the right way to do it.
Right. So now we've got rockets, sirens, rockets going off, and the guy that's giving announcements of what to do, where to run to, because they had bunkers with sandbags around it.
At the airport?
Yes, at the airport. The language was messed up. The intercom system was screwed up. So I heard, shh, I want you to run, or more than likely, shh, you get your legs blown off. That goes off real well. That goes off really well. Seriously.
I don't know how you can even make that up. Yeah.
What hurts the most is that I ran to a bunker, and the guy that I'd been sitting with for the last 14 hours, never saw him again.
Huh.
Never saw him again. Never saw him again.
So you have no idea whatever happened to that guy?
I'm alone now.
Huh.
I'm effing alone. I'm serious. Think about that. At least this guy knew my name and where I was from and where I was going and where my family and mother's name, and no one. And I don't know the guy who sat in front of me. We ran to different bunkers. Now I'm in a bunker, and the sirens go off. The plane takes off, and now I'm with no one. I'm with other people, right. Different ranks of soldiers, and I was a captain. But I felt unarmed.
Yeah,
it was not a comfortable feeling. It's not a comfortable feeling, irrespective of men in war. The guys that designed this stuff had been in World War II. I said, well, maybe they've been in World War II, but the guy that I've got had been to Korea, obviously, and he wasn't good at what he was doing. That's why I'm there. But it's a sickening feeling not to be armed.
Yeah, I can
and
imagine.
Not to know anyone. You don't have a friend with which, if something happens, well, what happened to him? I don't know. I don't know his name. Look at his dog tags. And it was a sickening feeling.
That's an interesting. That's an interesting perspective that I would never think about. I would never think about the loneliness of certain times, and because I'm sure that you become very. I'm sure that after a while you feel like the people around you are your brothers, right?
Yes, but not at that moment.
Not at that moment. Not being thrown into it. It's like going to school in a brand new environment to the nth degree. I mean, and it's not just. I understand that's not a great analogy.
Right.
I understand it's not a good analogy because
drill.
people are shooting at you. But
yes.
But yeah, it's that I never thought about the loneliness of going and being a fish out of water in the environment, but being a fish out of water because I don't know anybody here.
Exactly.
And no one's looking out for me.
None.
The only person looking out for me is me.
None. That's correct. That's correct. And once after the air raid was over and they marshaled us together, okay, gentlemen, this is what we want. We want officers, enlisted, senior enlisted officers in this rank. I want you to get this rank and get in this area, et cetera, et cetera. They put us up and they put us in ranks, officers,
Sure.
and they separated us into senior enlisted and then enlisted and then enlisted. And it sort of half-ass marched us over to a repo depot, which is a replacement depot. That's when you get assigned to your units, et cetera. And back then, we were allowed to carry our military pouch, our military records with us, even though they knew who we were coming. We had our orders, military assignments.
Is that what I see here? What's on your side there? What is that? Is that a 1911 in there or something? Is that a holster?
That's a magazine for two
M16 mags?
It's two 45 mags.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Right. You can't see. Unfortunately, the photo was cut off, but I've got
You're
car
holding
15.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Okay.
But so they separated us up real quickly. Now we go to repo depot, which is replacement.
Yeah.
And replacement and deployment, whatever they want to call it now. And someone actually knew my name, because they had a
list of who's coming in.
Who's on that plane.
Yeah.
Who was on the plane. And they said, okay, fine, you're going to be assigned to, you're an MI officer, you're going to be assigned to the MI unit. And we've got an MI representative we don't have an MI representative here. And they sort of sorted us out. But what hurt me the most is I couldn't find the guy that I had flown over there with.
It's interesting you keep coming back to that.
I was grasping for him.
Right.
I can't, even now, I can't remember his name.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's just a human thing. We want to.
Yeah, I was grasping for him.
Yeah.
And I felt lost without him. And I did. I was lost without him.
Yeah.
I was an adult. I wasn't a child. I was adult. I was trained.
Yeah.
I was as trained as I would ever be. But without him, I was lost. I knew no one. There were thousands at this point, hundreds of people around me. But I was alone. No one knew my first name.
Was he going to be in that guy? Was he going to be in that same
Didn't see him
unit
again, ever?
Yeah.
No.
Huh.
We were definitely not going the same. He was an MI. I was the only MI person on that plane.
Oh, interesting.
In that particular day.
Okay.
I was going to be assigned to an intelligence unit, I believed, when I got there, even though I was told I would be. Excuse me.
That's okay.
So now the repo depot, same hour, same half an hour or so. And I was led to believe that I'd get a chance to see Saigon. This is where I was, and I was in in Saigon. And I don't know why. I knew I was in the Army, but I still thought I might see Saigon. You don't go to Vietnam without seeing Saigon. That's the capital of South Vietnam.
Sure.
And you get a chance to see Vietnam for what it is rather than being thrust right into being shot at in a combat environment, because Saigon was because they had so many military forces there, Canadians, Australians, Canadians, Koreans in that area. It was quasi to believe that it was as fortified as it was going to be. Mm-hmm. Probably you could be in Saigon and be safer than you were in New York City or Chicago or Houston. And I'm not just kidding. I'm very serious. So I'm still without gun.
Right.
I want a damn gun. I'm here. Okay, guys.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And they're trying to, we're not going to issue a firearm here. You'll get one when you're in your unit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I said,
so you have to be transported again without a firearm.
Yes. And I said, let me get this right. I'm already in country. All right. And I'm going to be transported in another plane.
Another airplane.
Yes. A helicopter, actually, to take me to where I'm going to be assigned.
Oh, wow.
Which is in Vietnam, but no gun. I mean, really, guys. I mean, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
It makes none.
I wonder what their reasoning was.
Because planes crashed, And
you think that's just and I don't know how much inefficiencies or lack of communication you've seen in the military over the years. Because
you never fixed that.
Well, I was going to say, like,
It got worse in Iraq. It got worse in Afghanistan.
That doesn't make any sense.
They counted cartridges they gave you.
Was that by design, or was that just is it just logistics guys not understanding what the tactical guys actually needed? Or I mean, yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's something that would be corrected unless it was intentional, unless there was some reason that they did it that way, that it would have been corrected. But
I have tried in my own mind to reason with why they were so poorly, I hate to use the term, poorly orchestrated as a operating military. What did they learn in World War II? And they were so successful in World War II.
Right.
They didn't apply that in Korea. They applied the failures in Korea to Vietnam.
And Vietnam was tactically, it was a totally different kind of war too.
It was. I was trying to draw from the readings that I had done in World War II.
Sure.
I didn't read a lot about Korea, and I should have, but I didn't because it was a war to be forgotten about. It wasn't addressed a great deal either.
Yeah.
In all my training. Korea
I don't remember really ever learning anything about Korea in history.
I don't think there was anything beneficial we learned from Korea other than what not to do.
Yeah.
You don't put in, you're facing a country with a potential 1 million soldiers, and you send over 10,000. Give me a break.
Right.
50,000.
Yeah.
But in any event, I'm in Vietnam now.
Sure.
So I'm trying to deal with.
But still with no gun.
What I'm confronted with. Still no gun. No flak vest.
Yeah.
Nothing. And then I go in the repo depot, and I said, well, you're going to be assigned to an MI unit, the MACV, Military Assistance Command, up in I Corps. And I said, okay, now at least I know. Before I got to Vietnam, I read as much as I could about the military formations, headquarters, and 24th Corps, and different 1st Division 1. So I knew where they were.
Yeah.
So, and also I was planning my ride out of there. Oh, yeah.
You're thinking 12 months ahead.
Oh, no, I'm thinking about if things got really bad, of how to get the fuck out of there. I'm sorry. Everybody's got their own plan.
Well, I mean, that's just human nature.
No, it wasn't either. There were some people who counted on other people.
Yeah.
Not me. No, absolutely not.
To what do you attribute that? Is that just intelligence, or is that some kind of
the training?
Okay.
I was alone all the time anyway.
Okay.
And there was no one I could communicate with to rescue me.
Yeah.
I expected no one to come extract me from my plight. So,
interesting. Okay.
Again, no gun.
Right.
None. Vietnam is a downside anyway.
Yeah.
But it was hot. It was hot. And you might say you adjust to the heat. When the plane landed and I left this air-conditioned, pressurized environment on the plane that I've been for the last 14 hours, and I've been in Oakland, which is damp and cold anyway, and you land in Vietnam, it's 102, 103 degrees, and the asphalt, it's hot, and it's like going from New York to Las Vegas, and then suddenly you say, wow, this is hot. This is really hot.
And humid?
And humid.
Okay.
And humid. And you're already nervous.
Yeah, sure.
All that heroics, the training, all the training in the world is still that deep breath feeling of I'm out here and I'm exposed. And having watched the aluminum caskets going
that's one thing that I guess logistically they had no choice. They had to get bodies out as they were bringing bodies in. But you just think psychologically that's a horrible approach to
something that should have been done.
You got to think there's a way that they should have figured out how to shield those optics.
They were horrible.
Yeah.
And you know that someone in there like you who came over and didn't go back. I call that not going back. Sitting in the lap, get aluminum casket back. Well, anyway, now I've got to wait for a flight to go from Saigon up to I Corps. In this particular case, they sent me up to Da Nang. And the corps are starting with I Corps, which is 1 corps. I'll call it 1 corps, 2 corps, 3, 4, and 5. 5 is just below Saigon. Saigon is in 4. 3, 2, and 1.
And that's geographic, like
Yes.
That's the further the lower the number, the further north it is, or something.
That's correct.
Okay, further north is. I'm just. Like I said, I'm not a historian.
Yes,
but further north is more towards North Vietnam.
What do you think? You think?
So the further north you go, the hotter it is. Am I right? Or okay, not hotter as in and temperature.
Both.
Okay. Oh, it's hotter in temperature too.
Both.
Okay.
You know did you hear what I said?
Yeah.
I
So
said-
I-core is not where you want to be.
Both. I said both.
Both.
Both could be more than 3. It could be more than 2.
So when they say I-core, that's not, and it's 1. You're thinking, oh, okay. So I'm headed as about as hot a region as I can get.
And it's close to North Vietnam.
That's what I mean when I say hot.
When they say assemble troops, they're already there.
Yeah.
They sort of they go down the high. They skirt Laos. They skirt Laos coming down, and then the Cambodian border cut real close down, and then they slide into Saigon, the lower echelons, the lower regions, I-Corps. But
And you said Saigon was fairly safe.
no,
I guess
no, I didn't say that.
No, you're not safe.
Okay, not
Safer
I
than
used that term
Chicago.
safe. I said the belief that because of
Okay.
the huge numbers of Air Force,
Right.
Marines, Army, because this is the headquarters.
Sure.
Huge numbers.
Yeah.
And they had fortifications. That's why it was safer there than any place else.
Gotcha.
And like it or not, they made Saigon a place. MPs were there all over the place. But in any event,
So when they tell you you're heading north to
that's
I-Corps,
not really what I wanted to see.
well, I was going to say that's probably. And does that mean that does that mean you're going to be there for the whole 12 months, your whole tour, or do you know? Not necessarily.
At that point, I said, I'm trying to figure out a way that the time could go by a little bit faster than
Sure.
it's been dragging and things aren't going. Meanwhile, I'm still looking for this guy that I hadn't seen
And a gun.
since the plane, and another gun.
Right. Exactly.
A gun, excuse me, an assault style
Well,
weapon.
that's right.
I'm going to use today's
A
jargon.
rifle. A rifle. You want a
I
rifle.
want more than, yes. I
Yeah.
want more than just, it's what I call.
Sure. Pea shooter.
Yes. I felt inadequately attired.
Sure. Understood.
So
Understood.
I
You were
can't-
underdressed.
I felt I had a knife and I was going
And
to
I know you like to be outfitted correctly.
yes.
You
I
felt
was-
underdressed.
and it's a lost feeling, and
Yeah.
that's something that
Yeah.
I
It's
addressed.
funny you keep talking about that guy, and I think about how that really, I mean, the things, it's interesting the things we remember about our childhood and our developmental years, and then those situations and events that just burned in our brains. It's funny the things you remember, like smells. You remember smells, how things smelled. You remember what something felt like. You may not be able to remember exactly what details were, but you can remember how it felt. And I think it's really interesting that you remember that guy that you had kind of attached yourself to on the flight over.
Yes.
When you guys were trying to be loose and free, and
Yes.
that guy, you keep coming back to that guy. It's
And I've
really
never talked about it at this great length.
It's just interesting that's what's burned in your brain.
Yes. And
That
it
you're
gets
feeling
worse.
alone.
Yes. It gets worse. It gets worse.
All right.
So the repo depot said, okay, we got you're going to get a flight up to I-Corps.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, okay. And I said, well, you've got a chopper out there now. You could probably get on that thing. And I said, oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. I don't have a damn gun. All right.
Yeah.
I said, can you guys issue me something and I can give it to the guys on the way back? And then there's always someone who wants to be a logistician while you're in Vietnam. No, we have accountability. Sir, with accountability, you can't just give everyone a firearm and expect to get it back.
Wow.
And I said, I really don't give a damn whether you get it back or not. The key is to give me something as I fly. I'm in country.
Yeah.
I expect to be issued a rifle right now and a canteen full of water.
Right.
And a little medical kit. So
Sure.
I had my own,
Sure. Yeah.
and I had my own, everything I could bring on my own, that I brought on my own. I said, well, you can't bring that with you. I said, sure, I can't bring it with me. I did anyway.
Yeah. I know that about you.
Yeah. But I still didn't have an AR.
Yeah.
I wanted something,
Yeah.
and some grenades.
Something effective. Right.
And but in any event, eventually, the exact information becomes hazy somewhat at this point, because now I'm in nervous survival mode. I'm not getting on a damn helicopter Okay,
Right.
They're shot down constantly. Oh,
Yeah,
by the way,
yeah.
I'm also looking at wreckage.
Sure.
You know, not only the bodies that are laying there, but wreckage,
Helicopters.
helicopters that have crashed,
Right.
that they haven't quite cleaned up yet.
Sure.
And I said, okay, no.
Right.
Well, they got a C-1. Come on, Lawton, what's wrong? A Goonie bird taking off. Not a C-141, which is a jet. Four prop, dual prop cargo plane. I'll think of it in a minute.
Sure,
I'll think of the right term in a minute. Those son of a guns could.
The big ones, the C-130? Not the big ones.
C-130.
Okay.
C-130,
Yeah.
yes. That son of a gun could take off.
Sure.
I swear it was go down 15 feet and take off like that.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
We're not talking about movie stuff. This is for real.
Yeah.
You know. So I said, I'm not getting one of those. He says, well, you can't tell us what you can and cannot will do. And I said, I don't have a gun, but I can get one. Okay. What are you going to do? Send me to Vietnam? That became I believe I coined that expression immediately.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you know,
Well, they could put you in a military
I'm not
prison,
worried
couldn't
about
they?
that.
They
wouldn't.
wouldn't.
Think about it.
Yeah, I know, right?
Think about that.
Yeah,
What you did.
yeah.
I said, what are you going to do? Send me to Vietnam? I said, I'm not getting on that. This in the statement. Well, you can get over that. I see. It's not that important. If they thought that my assignment was that important, they would have something down here for me. But because I have to just get a ride, so to speak, I will get a ride on what I think is safe, what I think is safest of mode of transportation. C-130 is greater safe transport than any helicopter,
Sure.
especially when you see crumbles of remnants sitting out there on the runway that they should have cleaned up. Well, I grab a hop on a C-130. Again, who do I know? I'm in this huge foreign country.
No one. I know the answer to that one.
No one.
Yeah.
Not even I even tried to strike up the conversation with the guy who gave me the assignment. And I said, by the way, what are you doing? He said, I got your personnel records here. I'm assigning you to I-Corps. Your unit is going to be going to MACV, blah, 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 et cetera, and someone will meet you once you get to Da Nang. I said, okay, who's that person? I don't know. You just go,
Somebody.
Someone will meet you there when you get there.
It'd be nice to know a name, right?
What's my next question? Well, when the hell do I get a gun?
Right. Of course.
Well, don't worry about that. You'll be
Don't
okay.
worry about that.
So I get on this C-130, and a couple of Air Force guys are good. They're just good guys. The pilot, the loading, these guys are just masters of what they do. Okay, sir, strap yourself in. We're good. And I said, can I get a gun? He said, if it makes
That's not my job, sir.
yeah, right. But he said, but if it makes you feel good, I said it does. Makes me feel good. I'll just hold on to yours if necessary. We're talking Air Force. I said, what's this magazine is rusted? I mean, how many? Where the rounds? He said, you wanted a gun.
Wow.
I said, oh Lord, get me just welcome.
Can we wrap up there for today?
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
You still don't have a gun? I've got it.
It's hard to stop.
Oh, yeah.
Let me get up there first.
Yeah.
Let me get up there first, and I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. I'll get to one point before we.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
And I don't think there's a cure for it, but the C-130, they take us out over the water.
Okay.
Rather than going inland out over the water.
Of course.
Land in Da Nang. And I'll pick it up when we talk again. I'll pick it up from this point.
Yeah.
Land in Vietnam, land in Da Nang. I get off, and sure enough, there is a guy waiting for me because the knuckleheads that was in Saigon notified MACV that I was coming up.
Troublemakers coming.
They knew. And by the way, they knew who I was when I got there. Somebody had a folder on me and put a dossier, and they said, "Oh, him."
Oh, this guy.
Yeah. Oh, him. This guy. But I'm good at what I do. I can gather information on you before you know it. I'll know your date of birth and your habits and what you like and what you don't like and the type of shoes you wear, what time you get up in the morning, what kind of soap
making me
you
nervous,
use.
Lawton.
Life Boy, whether you Life Boy, kind of hair, whether you use what was that? hair pomade or whatever you use.
I'm not sure.
I could smell it, and I knew exactly what it was.
Sure.
So, but I landed, and sure enough, a guy came out to meet me. Durden, how are you? Nice to meet you. Blah blah blah. No saluting, because you salute, somebody shoots you. So we went through that process, and so we'll put you in a Jeep, and we're going to take you over to headquarters. We'll get you all suited up and get you squared away. Give you an assignment, let you know where you're going.
Right.
I'm in Da Nang, and we're on a beach.
Really? Okay.
As beautiful as Hawaii.
The landing strip was right next to a beach? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Yes. Now we drive off Da Nang, which was controlled by the Air Force.
Okay.
And the Navy.
Okay. Which means that you've got a pretty good buffer.
Oh hell yes.
Yeah, because you've got Navy can
the Navy didn't play
land articillery anywhere close to
the
the okay.
The Navy and the Air Force.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
Also F4 Phantoms.
Okay.
These guys this is serious business.
Yeah.
Now you know the sound of freedom, and I had never heard an F4 take off like that. They're not playing games when they take off, and they've got bombs that move. And I'm, while you're on the airport, I didn't see that in Saigon, but now I'm
interesting.
These are guys that are taking off from Da Nang going north.
Okay.
They're loaded
Sure.
for bear. This is serious. And watching F4 Phantom take off is not like watching television, watching movies.
Yeah.
These guys go down, and that thing goes up like that, and there's a sound that goes through you. It makes you know that you're an American and you're going to win.
Huh.
First
I remember.
time I felt that way.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if it's
Feeling
anywhere.
confidence.
My son and I had the opportunity. We were just happened to be hiking through Annapolis the day the Blue Angels were performing over the river, right next to the Naval Academy. Right. And the Blue Angel, and when they get down, and it shakes you to the core, and it's amazing.
That's the sound of freedom.
Yeah, it's great.
Is.
It's great.
So that was the first inkling of I'm okay now. I'm okay. Just watch the F4 Phantoms. I said, I'm okay now.
Okay.
These guys are serious, and they go off in teams. One takes off, the other's right there with them. There are four of them going up, going on the runway and up. And I'm sitting there, and I said, okay, finally. I'm okay now. I'm with them. I don't need a gun.
You're in a safe zone.
I'm good.
Good.
I'll just bring it to this point. I'm going to wind it up now, but I had to get to a point that's most important.
Yeah.
They came and picked me up, and I'm gonna go from when they first picked me up, and I'm gonna go advance a little bit, and I'll tell you what transpired.
Sure.
So they picked me up, and now I'm trying to see if there's anyone in this MI unit that I might have gone to school with,
right,
or elsewhere, because I had gone to advanced course, so I had to know someone.
Yeah,
I didn't know anyone. There were about 80 guys. I didn't meet them all at once, but I'm meeting a couple of guys that I still don't know anybody.
Yeah,
unfamiliar. They give you housing. This lot in this way you're going to be staying, but you're not going to be staying with us here in Da Nang with F4 Phantoms. Okay, all right.
Darn it!
I said I need a gun.
I saw that one coming.
Okay, it sounds funny. I'm laughing now.
You either give me some jets or you give me a gun.
I'm laughing now because when we left the base,
that's funny.
When we left the base, suddenly, if I can speak freely,
yeah,
I've got little raisinets down there now.
Yeah,
because now I'm leaving the base, and suddenly, because we're off base, we're not on a base.
Yeah.
We're going off into the hinterlands. And I'm driving around, and I said, whoa, what's going on? I said, I have no gun. They said, well, we'll get you a gun. And I realized that little pea shooter I had, I said, well, that's 6 that are going to go anyway.
Wow.
But we drove from there to the headquarters, which was...
See, now I know this preoccupation you have with always being armed.
Yes, absolutely.
Never being unprepared.
They told us, don't be captured.
Right.
Don't be captured.
Yeah. And how's that supposed to happen if I can't defend myself?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we get to an armed encampment, which is, we'll talk about that in detail about what we can talk about, what we can't talk about. But most importantly is, and now I'm going to skip now. I'm going to skip a lot.
Sure.
Okay, I'm indoctrinated. They come in and they tell me what I had to do and where I was going to do it. And I said, I'm not doing it here. Then reality struck. No, no. We're going to send you on a map. We're going to send you here to Trabang. And I said, I can't even pronounce the son of a bitch. You're going to send me there? Yes. What do you think this is? This is for real.
Was it further north?
Further north, further northwest. You don't see any fellow soldiers.
Huh.
Then I'm in there 24 hours yet, and then you get this. Oh my God, this is for real.
This is yeah.
This is, and while I understand now, while I was even in Da Nang, they had a little medical corps there. You can smell. It wasn't burning flesh, but they burn. There's a different smell that never goes away. It's like sulfur. They put sulfur in. There's no toiletry, so they burn the feces, and there's just that sickening, overbearing, sickening, hot heat and smell that you won't ever go. It goes into your clothing. It goes into your skin. You can't wash it away. It doesn't go away.
Yeah, that's the ones that burn into your memory there. The smells.
It does.
I'm sure.
And you're there for about 15 or 20 minutes. The driver of the Jeep, I'm reaching out to attach myself to someone. How long have you been
Right.
here? Where are you from? Blah, blah, blah. And it were the radio, the driver and one other guy that I didn't know, that he was going someplace that he was just riding in the Jeep, and I said, well, hi, how are you? Where are you going? He says, I'm getting off on there's no one to engage. The driver didn't want to engage us. The hell? Somebody could throw a grenade inside the Jeep.
Yeah.
Because I've been taught all that stuff before I got there.
Yeah.
So we get to our headquarters, and what did Lawton do? Lawton attaches himself to a friend. Just this guy says, well, why don't you be my roommate? I said, fantastic. He says, it's only going to be a couple of days, but at least we'll get to know each other because we want to acclimate yourself before.
Sure.
He said, oh, my God, they're going to send you where? He said, oh, wow. Oh, damn. Whoa.
It's like, maybe I don't want to get too attached to you.
He said, well, anyway, we'll bunk together for a couple of days anyway. The point I'm going to make, and it's going to be tough, it's a struggle from this point on, is when they send me out to Trabang, there was a small group of us there, and you attached yourself to someone.
Yeah.
Okay? All right? I mean, really get to know them.
Yeah.
You almost sleep together.
Right.
Right. You know them, and I could see his fingerprints. I could smell him. I knew who he was. You might say, well, yes. If you used when used after spice or any fragrances at all, because anything that wasn't rice and fish heads, if you didn't smell like fish, you were not Vietnamese.
Right.
And if you didn't smell that rot, there was a chew. I'll think of it in a minute. The brain will come back to me in a minute. But the betel nut juice, they chewed betel nut juice. Their teeth were rotted with brown, coated with brown. And if you didn't smell like that, so that's the first thing I did. I said, I want to smell like I'm Vietnamese. So you've got to eat fish heads and chew betel nut juice so that you lose that Lifebuoy washed down fragrance. And I'm in survival mode. Well, anyway, I attached myself to this guy, McLean. Real good guy. Lawton, let's get him, blah, 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 blah. And I get to know him, and each time, and I'm going to fast forward and then come back, and come back. But basically, they send me out in a camp, and I'd be out there for 2 weeks, no bathe, an absolute, I mean, if someone said, Lawton, you're going to hell, and I said, thank you, I'm ready to go. Why? It was better.
Better than this.
Yeah, it's better than this.
Yeah.
And the heat, the bodies, you cross a creek and you grab onto a log and it slides because it's someone's femur. When you get to the other side, you got the worst of smells of circumstance.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You can imagine.
I can't imagine, but
the guy that I attached myself to, right? We got to know each other really well. I'd come back, and each time I came back to a headquarters, we'd sit down, have beers together, and drinks together. And then after I've been in country for about 2 months, I come back and I said, where's McLean? Oh, he left. What? Yeah, he shipped out. He's gone home. How do you think I felt?
Abandoned.
Yeah. Worst feeling I've had in my life.
Huh.
I don't think I could have lost a brother or a sister that would have made me felt worse.
And you didn't know he was leaving.
I sensed he was leaving, but if you're not, you don't know when you're leaving.
Okay.
You go. You might say he should have told me. Well, if they knew he was leaving, then we did some things that
Sure.
you weren't supposed to have a beginning and end date. If I tell you, Toby, you've got some information for me, right? Yes. I said, well, I'll be here on today's Thursday. I'll be here Monday at 1 o'clock to pick it up.
Right.
Okay. You were doing what? Expecting me to be there at 1 o'clock on Monday. Well, I'm not coming back. Not only am I not coming back Monday, I'm not ever coming back. Ever.
Yeah.
I know I've missed a lot there in between.
Sure.
But we're in the business of you're not knowing when I'm going to come back again.
So we're going to be able to finish this interview?
Yes.
Okay. Are you sure? Because
Yes.
now I don't know if
Yes.
if you're actually coming back.
Think about that. I'm serious.
No, that's
No. That's the business we were in.
yeah. No, there's a lot of things that stuck with me on that, and we'll pick it up from there. If you don't remember, I'll remember. If I don't remember, you're going to have to remember where we left off. But
I'll remember.
thank you. Yeah, thank you for that.
I'm not going
That's
to
really
that
good.
For safety reasons, for our own safety reasons, I gave you it was compartmentalized
Sure.
to the degree that you thought you knew what I was doing, but I tried to not to tell you so that if you were captured, you really didn't know what I was doing, so you couldn't reveal it. Even though they tortured you, you still didn't know.
Right. The better thing than to not have the information pulled from you is to not have the information.
You didn't have it.
Yeah.
And that's bad because they said, you know something you're not telling us. And there's no way you could tell them. So be prepared. I had a story.
Well, thank you, Lawton.
Sure.
We'll pick it up from there.
Absolutely.
Thank you.